Copyright Forbidden Crown, Copyright 2017. This book is a work of fiction. The names, characters, places, and incidents are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemble to actual events, business establishments, locales, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of both the copyright owner and the publisher. The only exception is brief quotations in printed reviews. The scanning, uploading, and distribution of this book via the internet or via any other means without the permission of the publisher is illegal and punishable by law. Please purchase only authorized electronic editions and do not participate in or encourage electronic piracy of copyrighted materials. Your support of authors' rights is appreciated. Published in the United States of America. Copyright 2017, Victoria Pinder, Love in a Book. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. Kristin Wells held her refurbished pocketbook close to her chest, scratched side in. She'd spent an hour before her interview this morning buffing out the flaw in the black leather. She tapped her feet on the marble floor of the hotel. She'd applied for this position 3 months ago while browsing the job postings at her current employer, Miami Insurance. Who wouldn't want to travel the world as secretary for the royal Prince Antonio Aussa, the world's most eligible bachelor? She hadn't seen much of the world, and never a man as gorgeous as the prince in the photos. Her shoe slipped off. Drat. She reached down and fixed it as her heart raced. Her best friend Renee had convinced her to go for it. What did she have to lose by applying? And now here she sat in a Marriott hotel conference room, her legs jittering despite skipping her morning coffee. Kristin glanced at the old curmudgeon with steel gray hair and round brown glasses that sat at a black, shining desk near the door. If she got the job, would she report to this woman? She avoided eye contact but smiled as much as possible. The older lady stood and pointed toward the door to an interior office. Kristin got the impression that this was a temporary setup. The only thing on the desk was a phone. "You may go in now, Miss Wells." At least the interview would give her a peek at Antonio, who she'd researched online. He was a playboy prince from a country next to Italy that wasn't quite as big. If she landed this job, she'd have to brush up on her Italian to ensure his social calendar stayed in order. But most important had been that smile of his. It was magnetic. With luck, she'd see it in person. "Are you thinking about running away?" the older woman asked. "I'm going in, thanks." She fixed her black skirt, went inside the empty room and closed the door. Her heart beat out of control. Bright sun reflected off the ocean, visible from the glass walls, and she ducked her head. The hotel must use this room for weddings, she thought. A modern, sleek metal desk with a single white folder atop and 2 accent chairs for guests was situated in the middle of the room. The large sliding glass door would give access to the private beach, not that she was interested. Her pale complexion and the beach had never gotten along. She chose the seat in the shaded part of the room to avoid a burn and smoothed her skirt. A moment later, she heard the click of the door to her right, and in walked Prince Antonio Aussa. A shiver so deep it woke every part of her body spread through her, and she felt like she'd combust if he brushed against her. The pictures hadn't done him justice. His smile was better than magnetic, his shoulders more broad in his gray tailored suit, and his hair as shiny and rich as melted dark chocolate. He'd starred in her dreams over the last 3 months, but the reality made her tremble. He held out his hand in greeting. His palm looked massive compared to her small wrists, but she felt a zap when he took her hand to shake. "Nice to meet you, Your Highness." Grateful she hadn't stammered, she focused on the yellow legal pad in his hand. He hadn't said a word yet. "I'm excited to start our interview." She swallowed her nerves, "as I am very interested in this job. Millions of women would die to do whatever he wanted." He cleared his throat and took the empty seat beside her. She sat on the edge of her chair and waited while he assessed her plain brown eyes behind her black frames. Renee had urged her to get highlights in her brown hair, but she hadn't had time. Now she wanted to hide from his brilliance. Her skin grew goosebumps of awareness, but she kept her mouth shut. Her current job sucked the life out of her, and if she had to do one more fraudulent insurance claim, she'd jump off a bridge. Her life was boring, predictable, safe, and her third master's degree wasn't taking her mind off things. Being hired as the prince's secretary would allow her to travel and maybe pay off her condo, which she could rent while away, because she needed a major change and to figure out how to be happy in her skin. He scooted his chair closer to her, and her pulse raced. Why should I choose you? Because if he ripped off her clothes, she wouldn't protest? Her hand shook slightly, and she clutched her bag to hide it. His smile had triggered a longing for something more. Her body throbbed to know every inch of him. She'd never had a high school crush. Was this feeling like that? Kristin knew the math for them would never add up. She refused to let her emotions rule her, ever, and she certainly didn't believe in falling in love, especially at first sight. But as his paid secretary, her parents had instilled a solid work ethic. They were gone now, and she'd honor their teaching, even the silent lessons, like love being a delusion that eventually ate away and destroyed all happiness. Kristin needed to convince him that she was the best applicant. My undergraduate degree is in finance, so I can run numbers for you in addition to taking notes during meetings or updating your calendar. The idea of being flexible to meet the demands of a royal prince means I get to think on my feet. At her current job, she worked on the same items every single day. He sat back and she felt a pang of loss that his interest in her was gone. But then he met her gaze. She couldn't look away. You're sure of yourself? Did he think so? Normally, yes. Right now, she was a hot mess on the inside. When she tried to loosen the death grip on her pocketbook, she dropped it instead, the broken latch spilling the contents of her purse all over the floor. Is confidence a bad thing? Her cheeks burned as she bent down to collect her things. Once she'd stuffed her lipstick, mascara, pads that weren't necessary at all for another few weeks, and pens into her bag, she straightened in the chair. I'm sorry. I'm never this clumsy. I'm used to it. It's what happens when women meet me for the first time. Arrogant, too. She lifted her chin. Or it's your title. A crown can be intimidating. This was an interview, not a date. Kristin had to remember why she was here. She nodded. I'm career-oriented and a fast learner. He crossed his arms, and again her body grew warm from his perusal. Then he picked up the one folder on the desk. Your name is Kristin Wells? She had sounded breathless. She battled for control of her senses, but her skin heated and she feared she blushed. He stared at her, gifting her with his sexy grin. He closed the folder and the snap of papers filled the air. Would you take your glasses off for a minute? A simple request if her hands weren't shaking. She did her best, but lowered her lashes so she didn't have to look directly at him. If he saw into her soul, he'd see her fantasies of him and goodbye perfect job. Okay, but I do need them to see. He took them from her. His palm made her skin jump. You have beautiful eyes. Have you ever thought of contacts? Of course. Beautiful wasn't a word she'd expected to hear today. When she'd chosen her borrowed black heels, black pencil skirt, and feminine white button-up blouse. Once her glasses were on her face again, she looked up. I do have them, but I don't wear them often. He angled his chair closer. Any particular reason? If she somehow landed this job, she'd have to get her raging crush under control. She didn't like people looking directly into her eyes as he was doing right now, but she carefully chose her words to answer his question. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I know my place and how to be a professional. He read his paperwork again. Kristin, your resume also says you have a marketing background. Yes. At least her voice sounded normal. She crossed her legs. I've run a successful online launch for the watch band company I briefly worked at. His attention was drawn to the slit in her skirt, so she uncrossed her legs, self-conscious. We sold out of the band. Now I work for an insurance company. His gaze returned to her eyes. Why did you leave that job? The interview was back on track. Good. She could handle business. She'd always wanted to travel and learn, but she knew the value of a penny in the bank. Her parents had taught her frugal now meant security in the future. Her body eased. The watch band was exciting, but once they sold out, her position was over. And insurance. The insurance company because there were health benefits and a 401k, but it was so boring. Your position would be anything but, and I'm up for the challenge. I hope that's true. He opened the folder again and scanned the contents. So, let's get right to this. How much are you for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? Her pulse surged. Did she really have a chance here? And she had no clue how much she should say for a salary demand. What a terrible interview question. I would need to give 2 weeks' notice at work, but I don't have any family obligations. He stared at her, and she noticed that his brown eyes had a hint of green. No picture had ever captured that elusive color. You didn't answer the question. How much are you? She blinked. What question? She thought, but then she remembered the salary. She'd checked online, and the starting salary for a secretary was $40,000, but he wanted around-the-clock attention. Late nights meant she should request more. Her stomach churned. She needed to be in the ballpark number so that he didn't laugh her out of the office. $60,000? For the extra time, he rubbed the lower part of his chin. That's low for what I'm asking. Really? For a secretary, it's a competitive price. His grin curved into a smirk. How much for you to be my wife? She jerked in her seat. Was this a joke? Your wife? Nothing on earth could have prepared her for this moment. Seriously. She searched every corner, every wall, wondering where the cameras were hidden. Her mother had warned her to choose her future husband carefully and never fall for a playboy. Prince Antonio had a new girlfriend every other day. She tried to sound like she was in on the joke. Aren't you a world-renowned bachelor with women begging to be your wife? He nodded as if proud. Yes, but I want a wife with a head on her shoulders who doesn't expect my love or devotion. The air in the room felt thinner. He was serious. She let out a sigh. What? To start, I'll pay you $150,000 a year plus living expenses for you to be my wife, and the salary has options for pay increases over time. Her pulse raced so fast she wasn't sure how she managed to speak. The position he wanted filled was for his spouse, not a secretary. What duties would a wife perform? What about children? Sex? He riffled through the file and handed her a contract as he pointed to Section 2, Umbergraft 4. Now, if you want to negotiate, that's fine. But I already stipulated in the contract that I will pay a flat, one-time rate of $500,000 for the first child and then $250,000 for each additional, plus reconstructive surgery for every child produced. If you don't wish to raise any children, I can provide a 24-hour nursery. The words out of his lips were cold, professional, and devoid of any feelings. Love might not exist, but marriage was meant to be more than figures in a contract. One day, she had vaguely imagined she'd be a mom and have kids with a husband, dog, and a house in the suburbs. But she wasn't sure. In those moments, she never once imagined herself as some princess in a castle in a country she couldn't pronounce. She met his stare, and for once she didn't melt. I'd want to raise my own children. He held her gaze, and that speck of green mesmerized her. Would you like this job, Kristin? He made it sound like he was asking her to be part of his company, rather than sleep at his side for the rest of her life. Her heart pounded. Antonio would be hers. Her fingers ached to touch him, but she folded her hands in her lap. For him, this was business. Could it be for her too? It's a lot of money. He nodded. You're my top candidate. What would you need from me to close the deal? Life as a royal would be surreal, and the only thing she could compare it to was a movie, because honestly, things like this didn't happen in real life. Is this a trick? Absolutely not. Why did you interview me like this, for a job? What people are like on paper and in person can be very different. I wanted an escape clause, but now that I've met you, I see you are exactly what I expected. Her body stirred, but she deferred giving her answer. I don't want to read every day that you're sleeping around. She doubted a contract meant he'd be faithful, which was another reason to run out of this room. Public ridicule was not her forte. Run, right now. Discretion is a necessary component in my life, and I'd never publicly humiliate my family. Raised with old-fashioned values on a Kansas farm, her parents hadn't loved one another. Kristin had vivid memories of sitting at the kitchen table when neither of them spoke a word to each other directly, using her as a go-between to pass the butter. They'd stayed together because they'd made a promise to God, and not because they were happy. Every silent day slowly killed them. After their deaths, she'd sold the farm and moved to the city, betraying those values. She yearned for a different life, filled with hope. But if she went and married Antonio, for wealth and security rather than working for it, there would be no redemption for her from heaven above. Now it was time to ask the ultimate question. Each second dragged. She stared into his brown eyes, noting his regal nose and thick, dark hair. To be in his arms might be like tasting heaven itself. She couldn't let attraction rule her. She folded her hands over her knee to maintain control. Perhaps he meant that she'd go to a doctor for insemination. Anything was possible. Would these children be created from our union? He leaned close and she got a hint of almond and testosterone. Union is a nice way of talking about sex. She blinked, her body warming as she imagined them in bed. Sex is important. As if he hadn't expected her to agree, he sat back, breaking the spell. Yes, it is, and yes, it would be included in the contract. He then pointed to the paper in her hand. Attraction is not love. I want that made clear. This will not be a love match. Secretary, wife, or go back to her desk job where nothing ever happened. Kristin tucked the strand of her French twist that had fallen out of the clip behind her ear. How many other women have you offered this to? He pulled out another piece of paper from the folder. I put the ad for a secretary out worldwide. Then I had all-inclusive background checks done on every applicant. You are my first and only choice at the moment. She was the only? Seriously? She wasn't royal. Her parents had been farmers. She had no family. She didn't know anyone important who could help him in society. Kristin realized that made her perfect for a serial killer to stalk, not a prince to marry. Why? He studied her paperwork. Because, Kristin, you're smart. You have no family to tie you down. Your only trusted friend is your roommate, Renee. You're in debt for over $100,000 in student loans. You owe $15,000 for your car and $200,000 for your condo. My offer means you can pay these off in less than 3 years without racking up more debt. And since you've worked from the age of 8 years old for your father in the stables, you understand a job is a job. It really did come down to dollars and cents. He'd read her application and her problems in life like a spreadsheet. She adjusted her eyeglasses and focused on him. So, I could have been anyone? He raised 2 fingers on his right hand as a no gesture. You are also attractive. That was a requirement for me. Reconstructive surgery in the contract should have given that away, her brain shouted. But her heart whispered that she was overly cynical and that the man adored on multiple continents for his charm and good looks thought she was pretty. She was sure she blushed. 2 things. He leaned forward and put his hands together. What? Her fingers trembled as she picked up the contract from the desk. I'll need 24 hours to decide. Fair enough. And 2, this one was for her silly heart. She had to know. If they were going to share a bed, a life, the truth. If there was nothing, no spark, she couldn't go through with it. She stood and Antonio stood with her. The contract fell onto her chair, but her hands shook too much to even try to pick it up. She pushed her hair out of her face and then said, I'll need you to kiss me now. If I don't feel anything, then this will never work. The guttural sound he made from his throat told her he approved, and he wrapped his hands around her waist. Her body felt warm as butter melting on a summer day. Her eyelids fluttered as she waited for his touch. He said, We're clear that our union is business and not love? She opened her eyes and met his. She had always sworn she could take care of herself and wouldn't marry someone she couldn't respect enough to talk to every day. Love wasn't a factor. Abundantly. Closing her eyes again, she felt his lips inches from her mouth. Then here. His kiss set her heart soaring. She held onto his shoulders to stay steady, but her foot lifted off the ground as if she might float away. His lips crushed hers in a soul-searching sweep of passion, and she joined him in some place that must be heaven itself. No boy had ever come close to that kiss. Once his lips left hers, Kristin used the desk behind her to hold herself upright. If she left, she'd never have another kiss like that. If she stayed, she couldn't honor her parents' wishes that she marry someone who shared their manual labor, hard-working values. But they had been so unhappy. If she said yes, she might experience more of whatever had just sparked between her and Prince Antonio. She was sure her parents had never felt anything like that for each other. Antonio read his watch. See you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Meet me here with your answer." He took his file and walked toward the door they'd come in and opened it for her. "I'll be here, Your Highness." Chapter 2. Antonio Aussa stood near the window of his hotel suite, staring down at the empty beach below and then out to the ocean and mid-afternoon sun. Everyone here in Miami was tanned, except Kristin. She'd been pale, which would fit in fine in his country where the people were either snow-white or olive-skinned. His ancestors clearly hailed from the Italian border. The ring of his phone pierced the air, and he ignored it for a moment. Not more bad news. He still needed his father and wasn't ready to be king. He headed to the table he'd left his phone charging on by the second ring. Marco, his younger brother, popped on the screen, and he knew the call wouldn't directly be about his father. His mother would have called him if anything had changed. "Hello." Marco immediately fired off a question. "So, how did meeting your true love go, Antonio?" True love wasn't the word he'd use, though Kristin's sweet kiss tempted him more than he would have thought. If his father was still breathing, then he had time to make things right. He collapsed into the nearby chair and kept his eyes closed. He wasn't a total failure. Not yet. Kristin was the logical choice, and he valued logic, even if the meeting hadn't gone exactly as planned. That kiss replayed in his mind. "Stop. Marco, one day soon, you'll be like Lucio and myself as the clock counts down." A click of Marco's tongue told him that his baby brother didn't approve. "I understand that I'll have to marry in 2 years, but I won't be cold and mechanical as you. I can't believe you hired computer experts to track down exactly what components a spouse should have. Getting a wife isn't like takeout food where if you don't like it, you toss it in the trash. Computers were good at finding people with skills to do a job, and to be the future queen of Afe was a very important job. Truthfully, he wasn't ready to be the king, so he needed a wife that offset his own flaws, for balance. I don't have the luxury of time you have." The unknown law requiring his marriage before his birthday had just been found 2 months ago, since his parents had reclaimed their throne. 2 years isn't a luxury," Marco said. "It's a death sentence, but I won't go to my execution like either of my older brothers." Despite Marco's title, he'd spent years studying at Interpol. "You're used to facing your own death because of all the terrorism detection stuff you've learned." And execution was a strong word. Kristin's kiss hadn't felt cold, like a computer. She was sweeter than he would have thought, based on her 95% aggression score in her personality profile. At least he had facts to back him up. Lucio's image-driven strategy was sure to backfire. "And my method is nothing like Lucio's," Marco continued with his censure. "His is slightly better than yours, and I mean that in the narrowest sense possible because his method is stupid, but at least he's face-to-face with his options. Your computer programmers chose your bride." Silence was all that comment warranted. Besides, his only argument right now was that logic mattered more than anything else, but her kiss made him question if this was such a calculated decision after all. "So, now that you've met her, has anything changed?" Lust filled his thoughts. Her kiss excited him and made him feel more than the last woman he'd taken to bed. He refused to tell his brother that. He walked to the window overlooking the beach. "Nothing. I need to close the deal and get home." Marco snorted. "What happened to you as a child?" "Same thing that happened to you. English boarding school choked my emotions out of me." Antonio watched the beachgoers, kids with pails, parents in the surf with them, laughing. Beautiful women tanning on beach towels next to buff men in lounge chairs. In America, people seemed happy. His own country was ready for a civil war. Nobody smiled. Someone close to his parents stirred controversy around the right of kingship. When Antonio took the throne, if he took the throne, he'd have to find out who the agitator was, fast. "If you say so," Marco said like he hadn't a care in the world. "Look, I have to go. I can't wait to meet the soon-to-be queen and give her my condolences." Right. He and Lucio, as the oldest 2 males, had to marry by the age of 30 to stay in succession. He teased back, "Marco, I'll have my team find you the perfect woman so you have 2 years to persuade her. You'll need it." "Please don't. Victor Amadeus and I have plans to sweep across Europe and the world to interview women." The panic in his voice was all Antonio needed to smile and continue. "Oh, I'm ordering the workup now. Consider this a birthday present. "Have you spoken to Mother today?" Marco asked, quickly changing the subject. His heart banged in his chest. Their mother was at their father's bedside, holding the king's hand as he lay in a coma. If she called, it wouldn't be good news. He stilled and stepped into the shadow, away from the sun. "No, has something changed? She asked me to tell you to call. She wants to talk to all of us." The simple words made his body grow cold. If his father took a turn for the worse, then he needed to be back in Afsa right away. He'd promised his father that he'd protect the kingdom from this takeover threat, and that he'd find himself a wife as decreed by some ancient law. "Talk to you later." Hans. His stance widened and he closed the blinds. No one needed to see him as less than stoic, the trait that was often commented on as his most admired characteristic. He also cut the light so the only illumination in his suite came from the door of the other room. Satisfied he was alone in his own hotel room, he called the palace. He heard the phone click. "Mother? Antonio, how is this woman you met today?" His mother sounded stronger than the last time he saw her, and she hadn't started with bad news. His gut churned, but he pretended all was normal. "If she says yes, then you'll meet her soon. How are you?" "I'm holding on, but I need to know you'll keep our kingdom intact. The people are depending on you to lead them now." The 24 hours, 7 days a week vigil she held at his father's sickbed was admirable, considering his parents had often acted more like partners than lovers. "I'll do my best." "I know you will." She lowered her voice. "Your father isn't doing well." The chill in the air grew against his neck, and he sank down on the small sofa that wasn't made for a man his size. If something happened to his dad while he was in the States, he'd lose his chance to say goodbye. "What's going on?" "He hasn't woken from his coma. I don't know how much longer he'll be with us." One more day for his father to give him advice that he'd usually ignored in the past. This time, if he had the chance, he'd write down every word. He rested his head against the wall behind him. "Mother, I will get on the first flight home." "No, don't leave us in a crisis. Come home with a wife." "At this point, I don't care if you stop in Vegas and marry a showgirl." 60 days ago, before the law regarding the inheritance of the crown had been discovered, his mother would have needed to approve. Now that his marriage was a political tool being used to undermine his father's legacy and a reason for possible civil war, things had changed. If Kristin said no, then he just might have to marry the first available woman he found. He stood from the couch and stretched his cramped back and stiff shoulders. "I'm in Florida, not Vegas, Mom." "We can't lose everything, not now." Agreed. He'd have to marry. Kristin was the best option. "I have this handled. Let's talk later." Once he hung up, he went to his bedroom and took off his hot wool suit. Linen pants would keep him cool in this tropical heat, which he paired with a short-sleeved polo. A few minutes later, dressed more appropriately for the weather, he returned to the phone and pulled up the map application. Checking the address from Kristin's file, he plugged in her information. One way or another, he had to seal the deal with Kristin. He needed a wife, and the sooner he was on a plane back to his father's deathbed, the better. There was no time to waste. Chapter 3. The setting sun colored the horizon with an orange hue. Kristin turned off her car engine and stared into the clouds. Beautiful, as if anything was possible. Her gaze lowered from the sky to the black-tarred parking lot with yellow lines separating the many cars. Reality. This was her normal life. If she said yes today, she'd probably have a driver and wear designer clothes that would never touch the simple polyester that gave her skirt a little shine at the bottom of the black. And she wasn't sure how a crown might feel on top of her head. She parked and then went into her 3-story apartment building that spread over a half-acre of concrete. Green grass and trees were found a block away in a tiny park she sometimes walked around. Just like all the important things in her life, it was little and tucked away somewhere. Despite their issues with each other, her parents had loved her and provided for her until they died. After getting her master's degree, she'd moved to the city in search of a better life, but here everything was too crowded and made her existence seem even more isolated than the old farm. She craved a change. Kristin walked into her corner building and passed her neighbor Greg, the 34-year-old scuba diver and accountant, who waved at her. She nodded and ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor, hoping Renee wouldn't be mad that she was late. The clank of dishes in the kitchen greeted her as she went inside. Renee called out, "Where were you? The later we order, the longer it takes for the pizza to arrive." Kristin put her pocketbook on the lamp table by the door and kicked off her borrowed heels, then went to the counter where Renee was making a salad. "I had my job interview with the Royal Prince Antonio Aussa from AVC this afternoon." Renee's dark brown eyebrows arched with that quizzical expression she must give her students daily. "I know there is more." It was how she cocked her eyebrow that made her expressive face so distinctive. "That was at 3. You're late." Kristin began to feel normal as she nodded. "I was driving around aimlessly." Renee's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Kristin stiffened and hugged her waist to ease herself into believing Antonio Aussa was real and that the contract in her pocketbook was proof. If she explained this, Renee would push her to say yes to Antonio. She'd say she was being silly for hesitating, but Kristin wouldn't mention the contract or the lack of love promised. Her parents had been living proof that marrying based on feelings never lasted anyhow. Maybe her father was wrong, and that for once she shouldn't be practical. Right. Perhaps she needed the push. She met her friend's stare. "Because he asked me to marry him." Renee dropped the salad tongs into the huge blue plastic bowl she'd tossed romaine in. "Shut the door." Kristin turned her head toward the front door. "I did." Slang. "You have got to enter the 21st century." Renee reached out and took her hand. Kristin let her body relax. Renee's teasing reminded her why they were best friends. "Seriously? He asked you to marry him?" "Yes." She couldn't quite meet Renee's gaze. The contract wasn't part of this discussion. Her friend didn't need to know that part of it. No one should. "I saw your application for secretary. Did he take one look at you and fall in love?" Kristin shook her head fast. "Not love. That doesn't happen and never lasts anyhow. That's cynical and untrue. Love can last a lifetime, but that's for another day." Renee squeezed her hands. "So what did you say?" She tugged her arms free, but she kept her head down. "I needed time to think. Part of me was so mesmerized by him that I almost said yes, but my parents warned me all my life that work and security would bring me happiness. Marrying a prince I just met isn't exactly practical." Renee laughed and said, "If a prince with billions of dollars knocked on my door and asked me to marry him, I'd say yes." Right. Judgments weren't part of their friendship. She went to her pocketbook, dug out her phone, and used the restaurant's app to order her usual pizza. Just like that? Absolutely. Renee picked up the salad tongs again. The pizza would arrive in half an hour. Perfect. Kristin left her phone on the counter in the kitchen and went to the cabinet to get cups and plates. No, you wouldn't. You'd see through the BS and wonder if there were any cameras taping you. Renee walked out of the kitchen and put the salad bowl in the middle of the dining room table. "Oh, were you bamboozled in some awful prank I'll get to see on TV?" "No." She followed her out with the plates, centering each on a placemat. "He asked me, for real. I just feel like I was being played, like maybe I'm missing something." Renee leaned against the table and crossed her arms. "Why does he want to marry you? Did you ask that?" "Yes." She went to the wine cooler. "He listed off my resume and personal information. It seemed like I would benefit from the deal. I should have insisted that a secretary application wasn't a prescription for finding a wife. I feel so foolish now. Pour some wine for both of us, and we'll talk all about how you should be a princess." Renee immediately held the 2 glasses as Kristin popped the cork. "And I can be a princess's best friend." Once she was done pouring, she brought the bottle to the table. "Yeah, I've not been anyone's princess since my father walked out on my mother when I was 8. When he returned home 6 months later, neither one of them were ever happy. They never really conversed again. You have no idea what it's like to grow up knowing your parents hate each other while they sit right next to you and speak through you." Renee handed her a glass of wine and sipped her own. "Well, that was depressing. So let's lighten up, and you can tell me if he's as hot in real life as he is in your photos." Kristin took a small drink and sat, her elbow on the table. "Renee, he's hotter. TV and photos, I don't know. Make him somehow blander. He's sexy in such a raw, powerful way that I was shaken up. I wasn't kidding. I almost said yes to his marriage proposal on the spot. Renee held her glass near her face but hadn't sipped. What exactly made you say you'd think about it? Kristin gulped what was left in her glass. She'd applied for a secretarial position because it would pay off her debts and allow her to travel while getting out of the boring rut she was in. Marriage to a man that made her blood sizzle, while he insisted they couldn't feel love, ever, was a different proposition. The money was tempting, but his kiss was more. Raw hunger for him raged through her still. Once she swallowed her wine, she nodded. Self-preservation kicked in. "What are you talking about?" Renee asked. The kiss earlier had been off the charts, and the mesmerizing personality and good looks were part of the unbelievable person that claimed her lips in a tasty scoop of yumminess that didn't compare to anything, not even her favorite Chardonnay. So how could she explain it? She lifted her chin. "Despite how attractive he is, I want love to be at least part of why I get married." Renee scoffed. "Then marry Greg in our building. He's clearly in love with you, if that's what you want." The blonde, blue-eyed Russian immigrant was cute in a puppy dog fashion, but her heart never stirred at his smile. She reached for the bottle and topped off the wine glasses because the pizza would be here soon. "No, I'm not into him at all." Just then the doorbell rang. She put the glass down. "That's the pizza." Where was her purse? "Can you get the door while I go find my pocketbook for the tip?" And she raced into the kitchen where she had left the phone, and sure enough, her pocketbook was there. Her heart stopped racing, and she opened her wallet. A moment later, she walked out with her debit card in hand and stared into the brown eyes with the green specks of Prince Antonio. "You didn't tell me that the prince was," Renee said. "What?" Kristin vaguely heard her friend's voice, but she was mesmerized again. Antonio was real, and he was in her apartment. "Coming." Renee finished, and the last word was clear. Electric bulbs sparked on at the same time in her chest. She couldn't move, so she averted her gaze in hopes to regain her sanity. "Your Highness, what are you doing here?" He stepped closer to her, and it felt like her body might melt. "Kristin, I hope I'm not intruding." Renee's voice interrupted. "I'll give you a few minutes and head to my room." Kristin understood she should tell her friend not to go, because without Renee here, she'd be completely under the spell of Antonio. No, wait, but she was too late. Renee's bedroom door clicked closed. Her pulse zipped just because she was alone with him. She licked her lips and stared at his mouth. Earlier, his kiss had been out of this world. She lowered her lashes. "Your Highness, Antonio." He took another step closer. All she had to do was reach out, and she could feel the strength of his arm, his jaw. Her fingers ached to do what she wanted, but she instead held her elbow under her chest. "I don't feel comfortable calling you by your first name." He traced his finger down her arm. "I thought all Americans liked calling everyone by their first names." She glanced up at his strong, chiseled chin. "Not you. You're a prince." His voice was deep, and the vibration of his tone dug into her skin. "I wasn't always a prince." Nothing about them was alike. She had read all about him months ago when she'd applied for the secretarial job, and then every so often because he was fun to read about, to dream about. Growing up exiled with all your family's money in a secure Swiss bank account and attending various prestigious British institutions is not exactly roughing it. Her parents had expected her to make her own mac and cheese from the box when she'd come home from school. He'd probably never eaten anything out of a box. His lips tightened as if he was surprised at how she surmised his childhood. He massaged her shoulders. "Are you upset about something?" "No." "Yes." She swallowed. What bothered her was how much she wanted to take him to her bedroom. She was never this wanton, but she kept that thought to herself. She glanced at him and pretended her body didn't hum. "I thought you were going to give me 24 hours and that we'd meet tomorrow." "I couldn't wait that long." His deep voice was a mere whisper. In her mind, she imagined shutting the door to her room and slowly disrobing, one article of clothes at a time. Would he like that? Would he do the same? She lowered her lashes. "I don't think we should. My father is ill. I have to get back to Avsi right away." Oh, he wasn't thinking about seduction at all. A cold shower every 3 minutes near him might remind her to be herself. She ignored the zips and zaps that coursed through her and squeezed his hand. "I understand, I'm sorry." He placed her hand on his heart. I was hoping you might accompany me. I'll give you a tour, take you to my favorite restaurant to get dinner, show you my country. Can I come?" Renee's voice echoed through the apartment. She hadn't heard her best friend open the door. Neither of them moved, but Kristin called over his shoulder. "Renee, I thought you were giving us some privacy." Renee's voice came down the hall. Then she peeked into the kitchen and pointed to the counter. "I was looking for my headphones." "Oh." Antonio dropped her hand from his heart, and her skin ached to touch him again. She tugged on her ear and neck, wishing she'd worn her mother's necklace today. The gold locket reminded her that she wasn't alone. Renee walked into the foyer area and grabbed her bag. "Your Highness, my friend Kristin gets scared of good things happening in her life. Her parents taught her to always look for security first. It robs her of spontaneity sometimes." "Wait, what?" Kristin blinked. "No, I don't." "Waff." Antonio stroked his chin. "Kristin, if it would make you happy, you and your friend Renee are welcome to join me in my private jet." Renee nodded her head at her behind Antonio's shoulder, but left it up to her. She shifted from one bare foot to the other. If she saw his palace and enjoyed it there, would she ever want to leave? She was in danger of ignoring the love portion of that contract in her bag. She gazed at him again, and her heart whispered to try. "Okay, can we get 10 minutes to pack?" Antonio stepped back so he could speak to both of them. "Sure, but remember the royal palace has everything you might possibly need." Renee gave the thumbs up sign. "I'll be back in 10. I've never ridden in a private jet to Europe. At least her best friend had been to Europe. Kristin hadn't ever left the southern portion of the United States. Renee ran down the hall and out of view, and again she heard the door click. Antonio's presence overwhelmed her, and she instantly fell under his spell. He reached over and touched her. "Kristin?" She looked up as he wrapped his arms around her. "I wanted to know if that kiss earlier today was my imagination playing tricks with me." "Me too," she managed to say. Then his lips claimed hers, and she felt like she was being lifted into heaven itself. The world faded away. Antonio could actually be hers, because right now the only thought that floated in her mind was that she was his. Her heart had already decided. As he ended the kiss, he smiled and traced her lips with his thumb. "Definitely not my imagination." Nandunda blai sam lapon. Least they both agreed that between them, their kisses were explosive. The contract read cold, hard facts, but the man in her arms was hot. Right now, she didn't need to decide anything else. They were going. Chapter 4. Kristin's scuffed sneakers had seen better days, especially when compared to the plush, thick blue carpet she walked on inside the jet. The small windows along the side were the only things in common with the flight she'd taken once from Miami to New Orleans. There were no rows of seats. Instead, it seemed like a living room in the sky. How could Prince Antonio think she fit into this world? At least he'd stayed and talked to the pilot, giving her this minute to adjust. If he saw how out of place she looked, he probably would reconsider his marriage proposal. Renee looked around with a grin. Kristin whispered, "This jet is nicer than our apartment." Shh. Renee dropped her purse next to a seat by a window. "If you marry the prince, he'll expect you to go in things like this all the time." Kristin's face felt hot. She shouldn't blush, so she looked at her shoes again, which didn't help. I saw you kissing him." Renee interrupted and sat in the seat. "You both have chemistry." Kristin folded her hands together and closed her eyes. His lips on hers had been unexpectedly hot. She'd do that again, and possibly more. "I never knew a kiss could be so potent," which was why she'd packed her one pair of never-used, sexy underwear that she'd bought on a whim last year. And also why she'd emailed her boss requesting time off, even if she got fired, even if she didn't marry Antonio. Taking this leap into the unknown was worth the nerves. Renee hit a button on the white leather seat and it whirred, then reclined flat like a bed. "Now that's intriguing. Here he comes," she whispered. "I'll go to sleep in this pod. Good night, Kristin." Without another word, Renee hit another button and fully encapsulated herself in her seat pod, which blocked her face from view. The carpet silenced Antonio's steps, but she sensed him behind her. Goosebumps grew all over her in the hope that he touched her. "Your friend is going to sleep so soon." "I guess." She inched away. If she didn't, she'd lean on him and at some point beg for more kisses. It wasn't good or sane, especially not near her friend. He took her hand and led her through more chairs to a kitchen area. "Well, let me give you the tour so you can choose where you want to spend the next few hours, though I recommend getting a good night's sleep. We'll land in the morning time in Absi, with a full day ahead of us." The stairs went up to a second floor. No flight she'd ever taken had 2 floors. "Take me upstairs?" He nodded and walked with her. Once they made it to the next landing, he said, "Up here is the lounge. This is for business meetings, reading, working." The door meant privacy. Finally, she took the contract out of her pocketbook, grabbed a pen, and then motioned for him to sit at one end of the rectangular boardroom table while she went to the other side. He stared at her and said, "Or that." She'd figure out why he'd asked her for marriage later. But first, they needed to discuss the contract. She dropped into a leather seat. "Please close the door because there are a few things I'd like to discuss." "Sounds fair." He followed her directions. The door clicked closed, and she knew no one might hear them. Her heart began to pump a little faster. Once he was seated, his brown eyes with flecks of green caught her attention. Her slightly bent papers were now in both of her hands, and she looked down. Article 1, Paragraph 7. He tilted his head, and those magnificent shoulders of his made her ache to let him hold her. He stayed in his seat and asked, "Yes?" This was her meeting. She took a deep breath and then read the contract. Sex without 24-hour notice, subparagraph 3 states, "Sleeping will remain separated." "I want you to delete this." "Home?" He nodded. "Okay. Home." She used her black pen to strike it out. She then traced her neckline and flipped the page. Once she was settled, she said, "Moving on to Article 2, Paragraph 3, outward expectation that I must always wear gold and diamonds. Delete this." "Home?" His eyes narrowed. "Why?" She tapped her pen to the table. "I like to work out, and I'm not wearing a tiara or a diamond necklace when I'm trying to stay in shape. We can amend this to reasonable wearing of jewels and precious metals." The sexy smirk he wore in the pictures now showed up on his face, and she swore this one felt like it was just for her. Done. She wrote the word reasonable and struck out always on her contract. Now her pulse zipped. She looked down and read, "And now Article 3, Paragraph 2, separated quarters. I'd like this entire section removed." He rested his elbow on the table and leaned forward, though they were still 8 feet from each other. His eyebrow lifted as he stared at her. "You don't want your own quarters in the castle?" The contract stated no falling in love clear enough, but she wasn't going to argue on that one. Once she had time, she'd find out if she could work around that provision. Her entire body ached for his touch, so she kept her head down and stared at the paper in front of her. "If we are to be married and learn to trust each other, then we should share our lives as much as possible. And that includes sharing a room and bed." Once again, he massaged his chin, a habit, she surmised. "So, you are thinking about signing the contract?" She fixed her glasses on her nose and flipped the page of the contract again. "I still want to see your home, but if I do marry you, I want to be clear that I expect we'll live, eat, and work together." He flattened his full lips, and she wished he'd kiss her again. "Eat?" Oh yes. She had almost lost the ability to read. She traced the paper until she found the part she needed. Article 3, Paragraph 7, meals. "I'd like this section amended where it states whenever possible, we share meals together without interruptions. I want conversation." He folded his hands in front of him. "I tend to eat at odd hours due to the responsibilities of the crown. My title is very much a job." Her heart hammered in her chest, but she had to ensure she had a chance at more. Her cheeks felt flushed, but old memories of her parents and how they never spoke to each other replayed in her mind. Even if she earned an A on schoolwork, nothing brought them together. Then her dad died, and her mother wouldn't mention his name. She blinked, and the memory was gone. "To me, the dinner table is where we should shut off the electronics and tell any advisors that you are not to be disturbed unless it's a matter of grave importance. I want us to talk to each other about our days." Duly noted. She crossed out the section and wrote "eat together." Other than the part on love, the contract was clear and laid out what was expected in their marriage, not unlike a normal prenup. She'd read plenty of those while at work. She folded the papers and smiled. "Well, this was easy. He sat further back in his chair, the blue of his polo complementing his olive tones. "You're done then?" She pushed the contract to the side. "Yes, though I still need to see your home before I make a final decision." He stood and took 2 water bottles from a mini fridge under the counter. He joined her at her end of the table and gave her one. "I am prepared to add now that once a month, you and I will take a night for ourselves where you may choose our date activity. Dinner, dancing, movie, whatever your heart desires." "Good." She turned her knees closer toward him. Her jeans brushed against his creased linen pants, highlighting their differences. "Sounds great. Now, why are you really looking for a wife?" He reached for her hands. "Kristin, to start this relationship with trust, I should tell you that the law states I must marry by my birthday, or I will be stricken from inheriting the crown. While I might not care about the title, it also means I'd never get to see my parents or my brothers again, because I can't come home, which can't happen. I want to let you see everything and decide, but when we land, I'm going to hear about my father's health. If the doctors tell me he doesn't have long left, I have to make choices fast. I hope your dad gets better." If she had 5 more minutes with her own mother before she'd died, or if there was anything she might have done to please her at that time, she'd have done it. She pressed her hands to his palms. He let out a sigh. "The doctors are preparing for the worst. No wonder he seemed so tense. She'd had no idea. Nothing about the king's illness was in the news. What's wrong with him?" His intense gaze held despair, and she understood the newspapers had his character all wrong. He wasn't the playboy prince from those articles, but a loving son. A section of wall around her heart fell. His voice wavered with a thread of sadness when he said, "He had a heart attack, which led to pneumonia. Now he's been in a medicated coma for a week." A coma was awful. Her mother's cancer had been a slow death, but Kristin had never wondered whether or not she'd wake, or if she could say goodbye. Her eyes moistened. "I am sorry." "No, again he let out a sigh, but then he wiped a tear off her face. "Kristin, I'm going to kiss you now." She licked her lips and opened her eyes wide, looking around the room. Nobody was around, and Renee was downstairs sleeping. "You are?" He stood and offered her a hand to help her up. "I want far more from you than I expected." He did? Guess we'll see." She wrapped her arms around him. His kiss made her want more than she'd expected too. She used the table for support as she wasn't sure she could balance. No one had ever made her feel this way. His hand traced the side of her breasts and she ached. He could have all of her. She'd push past her reservations and say yes. Her parents weren't the best example of a marriage, but it was time to let that go. Antonio's arms felt right, and she'd stay within them, now and forever. Chapter 5. Kristin woke and immediately realized that the jet wasn't moving. Nothing purred under her, signifying that the engine was off. They must be in Absea. Kristin wiped the sleep from her eyes and pressed the button of her pod to get up from her cocoon. She stretched, and a moment later, Renee handed her an orange juice, a coffee cup in her other hand, and took the seat next to her. "Good morning. You look pale." She clutched the armrests and met her friend's brown eyes. She bit her lower lip before she confessed, "Last night I'd have slept with Prince Antonio." Renee looked her up and down. "So why didn't you?" Unable to believe what had happened, she covered her eyes with her hand as she relived how he'd ended their intimate moment. "He put me to bed, alone." Renee sipped her coffee. "Did he say no thank you?" Kristin shook her head. "No. Renee, I'm in uncharted waters and he's way out of my league." Renee put her coffee down and reached for Kristin's hand. "So that's what the problem is." Kristin blinked. "What problem?" The plane door opened. He'd be back any second. Adrenaline rushed in her veins, but Renee was calm and kept her voice low. "He's not out of your league, Kristin. He's asked you to marry him. You offered to sleep with him. I'd guess he wanted to wait, because you're worth it." If Renee was right, that he'd waited out of respect for her, then the energy that surged around him just grew in strength. She stared at the ground to hide her eyes. "What in the world do I have to offer someone like him? I'm not exactly cut out to be a princess." Perhaps that's what he wants. Renee released her hand and picked up her coffee mug. If he wanted to marry some stuffy princess type, he had the chance. Instead, he asked you. Her friend sipped. Kristin drank her orange juice in one gulp and spoke quickly. Look, I like kissing him, but the idea that he's a prince is seriously sending me crazy mixed-up thoughts. I wish he was normal. Renee peered into her mostly empty coffee mug. No, you don't. If you wanted normal, you'd have chosen Greg. Again with Greg. Kristin glanced at her friend. You mentioned him last night, too. Renee's cheeks turned red. I did. Did you like Greg, Renee? With a loud sigh, she nodded. But he never noticed me, and in the end, I want someone who loves me because I'm awesome. Kristin stood and then offered her hand to help her friend stand. Once Renee was up, she whispered, Who knows? Maybe there's a hot guy in Absy that you're supposed to meet. Renee laughed. Shh, your boyfriend will hear you. Antonio joined them. Kristin's heart soared. He was so handsome this morning, this time in a navy blue suit tailored for him and a crisp white shirt. Boyfriend, huh? Her own face felt hot, and she wished she'd had a chance to brush her hair or wash up so that he'd think her attractive too. Renee gets ahead of herself sometimes. Antonio looked spotless and perfect as he fixed his cufflinks. Are you both ready? Give us 5 minutes, she said. She needed to change and clean herself up. She'd look a wreck if she walked beside him in her jeans. At least she'd packed a dress. Paparazzi will be outside, ready to snap your picture. He kissed her fingers. I thought I should warn you. I'll meet you near the door. Her lips tingled with anticipation of a kiss, but he left. Kristin grabbed her carry-on bag for a change of clothes. A photo meant she'd lose her insurance job for good. Proof that she wasn't sick at home with a cold. She buried the panic of not earning a paycheck and shook out her blue Calvin Klein dress with a tiny flower print. Renee had chosen capris and a knit top with leather flats. A few minutes later, she and Renee rushed to the front where Antonio sat with a coffee and his iPad. He put it down instantly and walked over to her. Take my arm, Kristin. Aurin Havavsi. His muscles flexed the moment she wrapped her hands around his arm. She also felt lighter. How in the world had he found her? Now she was in his country and would see everything she could. The moment they stepped outside, people cheered and lights flashed in her face. She turned into his shoulder to block the bright lights. What's all this? Aurin Havavsi. He winked and led her through the crowd toward a waiting limo. I'm returning home. This is a small crowd, but once they see that I'm with you, and they tell their friends, the crowd at the palace will grow. Renee followed her like a rock star in oversized sunglasses, her form-fitting capris and top. Kristin wished she channeled that instead of the Easter Sunday look that gave her no sense of confidence. Kristin returned her attention to Antonio. What am I supposed to do? They neared the limo and he turned around. He waved and she glued herself to his side. He whispered, wave. She did as he instructed while Renee hopped inside the limo. Antonio wrapped his arm around her waist. They want to get a good look at you. Oh, goodness. Antonio kissed her cheek. Instinct took over and she hugged him. The cheers grew louder, which broke the spell. Had he kissed her for publicity? She sucked in her breath but didn't ask here. He motioned for her to go inside, and then he was last in the limo. A few seconds later, the driver took off. Kristin settled herself next to Antonio and felt calm and collected with his arms snug around her shoulder. He smiled that sexy grin of his, and he smelled like almonds. Love might not exist, but whatever she felt with Antonio was too good to ignore. Once they were driving, he pointed out the window. You'll notice the green hills. Our country has had every ancient empire try to depose our royal family for almost 2,000 years, but we're the oldest original family monarchy. Many of my ancestors have all managed to return from abroad, just as my parents did. My grandparents were deposed with communism. My ancestors left Rome to settle here, guided by the Virgin Mary, or so the legend goes. History was always interesting, but a hobby for the rich, according to her father. She envied Antonio's lineage. I didn't know my grandparents. Mom raised me after Dad died, so when she died, I was by myself. I wish I knew more about my past and where my mom was even from. His hand brushed against hers, and she felt a spark banish her sadness. I can run a DNA sample for you so you can at least read about your genetic ethnicity. That sounds nice, actually. I've always been so alone in the world. The limo reached the top of a hill, and suddenly in the distance, a huge white palace with a blue roof appeared, along with 4 towers. As they grew closer, Adrenaline raced faster through her veins. "Is that where you live?" He nodded. "Yes." She continued to stare out the window. If she accepted his proposal, she'd live there too. Her biggest apartment ever had been 750 square feet and never enough closet space. "No wonder your ancestors all wanted to come home. It's beautiful." He came beside her, and her body tingled as he pointed. "My favorite part is the river that the east wing overlooks. In the morning sun, the white tower has a golden glow." His cheek brushed against her face. She sighed and wished he'd kiss her, but she knew better. "This could all be my new home because I applied to be your secretary." He turned and stared into her eyes. "I'd also be your husband." It almost sounded like he wanted that for himself, and not to save his future inheritance. If he cared about her, then her life would be fabulous. The limo drove through the gates, guards on both sides. She kept his hand in hers. If this was a dream, she never wanted to wake from it. Part of her wanted to say yes, right now, and not care about anything else. But her heart whispered she didn't want to be like her mother. Her mother had bitterly cried years ago that she had married for love and should have listened to her own parents' advice that she'd made the wrong choice. She had said love was an illusion, yet Kristin still wanted to be loved. Once the limo parked and a footman opened the door, Renee hopped out first. Kristin held Antonio's hand and whispered, "Wait, I like you. It's your title that makes me hesitate. I'm not made to be a princess, and I don't want to end up like my mother." "What happened with your mother?" "She was a very unhappy woman." "That's not you." He brushed her hair away from her face. "If something happens to my father, my bride becomes the queen. I'm hoping that woman will be you." She couldn't move. She lowered her lashes and listened to her heartbeat. She tried to imagine a crown on her head, but in her imagination it fell right off. She squeezed his hand. "Yeah, I'm normally the girl who fades into the wallpaper." Antonio gently lifted her chin. "My mother can teach you the ways of the palace. She learned, and so can you." His mother, the queen. She likely had been born into the royal life too. She wasn't a girl from Kansas who ran from the farm and migrated to Miami for jobs that she ultimately quit because she was never happy in any of them. She narrowed her gaze and asked, "What was your mother before your father married her?" He winked and then slid out of the car. "His secretary, actually." "Oh, so it's a family tradition." She quipped and laughed as she followed him through massive royal blue doors that were double the size of her. Renee waited for them, nervously quiet. He walked her through a small lobby area that reveled a theater, and then they went into a grand ballroom. Gold and gilt decorated the walls. Was it real? She stayed on his arm, but then a nice-looking man with a similar version of Antonio's face and about Antonio's age rushed over to them. "I apologize for interrupting, but my brother needs to come with me, now." Antonio's eyes widened, and he squeezed her hand a little, though she could see in his gaze that he was worried. With a glance over his shoulder, he nodded at someone and then returned his gaze fully to her. "Kristin, Walter here will show you to your rooms. I'll be back as soon as I can." "All right." He kissed her hand, but she saw the pained flecks in his brownish-green hues that told her he was scared. She joined Renee, and the man charged with taking them to their rooms, but she watched as Antonio raced out of the room with his brother. Her heart thumped, and she prayed everything was okay with his family. Chapter 6. Was it his father? Was this the end? The questions swirled in his mind, but Marco didn't slow and never said a word. He hadn't even asked for an introduction to Kristin, though the glint in his eyes gave away his interest. They arrived at the medical ward, and his heart nearly stopped. His father. He had so much to say, and he wasn't ready to lose him yet. Marco opened the door, and instantly his mother, Queen Anna Camilla, stood from her chair while she wiped her eyes with a tissue. The sick bed was behind the white partition, just out of view. This must be bad news. Why hadn't they called him? His mother opened her arms. "Antonio, there you are at last." "And minning midoming bande nolly. Non and helmo the phoning nano is hardening midamorna non huanath phono mingdane." She pointed toward the sheet and the corner of the bed that peeked from behind the white curtain. "It's your father." "No." He felt like a lost 10-year-old who called for his parents to find him in an open market. He stood stiff, not ready for this. To be king, to lead his country, to lose his father. He choked on his words. Did he? Son? His father's raspy voice made Antonio's hair stand on end. Alive? He was alive. His heart soared as he walked forward, pulled the curtain, and stepped closer to the bed and looked into his father's warm amber eyes. King Leopoldo looked weak and fragile, when in Antonio's memory he was larger than life. He slumped into the seat beside the bed, took his hand and tried not to cry. Father, Leopoldo tapped his hand and asked in a weak tone, "Is it true you brought an American here to be your bride?" His father coughed and the boom took over the room. Antonio stood abruptly. "Save your voice." "Yes, I did." His mother's words echoed from behind them. "Politically, are you sure she's the best choice, son?" According to his team of experts, yes. Politics had been part of the calculations he put into play. "Mother, our people are choosing between communism and capitalism. In marrying an American, I'm proving my capitalist leanings. With less than 60 days in which to find a miracle, he had made a logical choice." Their gray-haired mother leaned on Marco's arm, her blue eyes wise. "Half of the country doesn't have the same value." "Less than half, mother." Antonio was the Crown Prince of Aussa and understood his responsibilities. "It's my job, along with the rest of our family, to ensure our people win the votes this fall." "We're in trouble if the communist agenda becomes the reality again," Marco said. True. King Leopoldo had pledged their personal bank accounts to rebuild Absi. Antonio was now guardian, and he didn't take the burden lightly. "We'd go into exile without a penny." His mother straightened. His younger brother shrugged. "I liked England. Marco, this is our home." Their mother scolded her youngest son and came closer to the bed. Antonio backed away to let his mother have his spot. His brother stayed near the door, acting like he hadn't a care in the world as he leaned on the frame. "I saw your Kristin. I must say she's quite pretty. Was that one of your factors after all?" His search had included looks as well as brains, but nothing prepared him for actually meeting Kristin Wells. He hadn't told her about his bride-finding software, not that he was sure she'd care, but he'd hate to hurt her feelings when they were just getting to know each other. "I wasn't going to marry just anyone. She had to be nice enough to look at." Marco patted his back. "Well, I can't wait to have a conversation with her at dinner. Take care what you say." Their parents spoke quietly at his father's bedside. Antonio glanced at his brother. "I still have to convince her to marry me." "She hasn't agreed?" Marco asked with surprise. "So why is she here?" If his father survived, he could go a few weeks and give her time to adjust, at least until his birthday. He still had no choice to marry, but it wasn't a minute-by-minute scare, and he could now offer her an actual ceremony, plus a few days to convince Kristin would be very pleasurable. He looked out the window to the maze in the green garden. "No, not yet. I'm giving her time to get the tour first before the ring goes on her finger for life. Now that Dad is awake, we can get married in the church where Mary had it snow." Their mother turned from their dad's bedside, intending to join them. Marco had no care for decorum as he said, "So you figure one trip around the Rose Garden and a dinner in the East Wing Tower and she's yours." Antonio rubbed his chin. "Dinner in the tower, alone. Thanks for the tip." Marco's lips wouldn't quite close. He stood there with his head tilted as he stared at him. Wait, the Playboy Prince is actually trying to seduce this woman? His father's weak voice carried across to them. She must be pretty then. Antonio felt like a 12-year-old. His face was probably crimson. "Father, we should not be having this conversation at all. You need your rest." His mother made a tsk sound and guided both of them to the door. "Your father is still in danger, but the doctors agree that it's much more likely he'll have a full recovery, so long as nothing upsets him or causes him undue stress." Antonio called out, "Father, I'd prefer to remain the crown prince for a while and not king. Rest, please." His father yawned. "Bring the American to meet me." "Yes, sir." Antonio followed his mother and Marco out of the room. Once the door clicked closed, he stared at the empty walls that once had held family portraits. The communist regime had smashed them or sold them. Now the long hall was clean, well maintained with powder blue walls, but he always felt this place was missing something. His father restored order, but he'd like to replace or find a few stolen pieces of their art. And if he hung Kristin's beautiful portrait in the hall near the grandfather clock, He'd see her just as she was right now. He shook his head. He'd not think about that. "Mother, I should go check on Kristin and her best friend, Renee." His mother snapped her fingers. "Yes, please have them prepare for dinner. I'll ensure a variety of dresses are sent to their rooms." Kristin had packed herself, one suitcase only. Would she be offended if suddenly his mother sent her a wardrobe with instructions? "How did you know they'd need dresses?" His mother shook her head. "I've never met an American with one travel bag that brought the right clothes to meet a queen. Americans tend to either overdress for the occasion or, even worse, underdress. If she is to be your bride, then I want the world to see her as perfect. I will offer my assistance." Staff must have told his mother what Kristin carried, and if she'd unpacked any clothing worthy of note. Perhaps it was best to talk to Kristin about his mother's plans for a dress. If he made the rules, she could wear jeans because she had the perfect shape that showed off her curves in the ones she wore last night. But for now, they were talking a family state dinner. He nodded. "Thank you, Mother. I will talk to her." His mother returned to his father's room. Antonio walked down the hall, intending to knock on Kristin's door. He made it 10 feet down the blue hall when his brother called out, "Antonio, Marco." He stopped and waited for his brother to catch up. "The other one you brought with her, what's her deal?" He hadn't researched Renee other than the fact Kristin wasn't friends with known criminals. "Renee Brown, Kristin's best friend. She's a teacher out for her summer break." Marco crossed his arms. "Well, I'll be sure to keep her busy so you can win over your computer date." He'd have to find a way to tell Kristin, but he wasn't sure how. About that, perhaps his brother might hold his tongue. "Please do not mention the search I ran to find Kristin." They walked down the hall together. Marco asked, "Does that mean you didn't tell her?" "No. It shouldn't be a big deal. Lots of people used internet searches to find what they needed, and he'd needed a wife. Everything he did had been logical." At the door to the grand hall, where ancestors threw elegant galas and the paint had specks of gold embedded, Marco asked, "Then why does she think you flew across the globe and asked her to marry you?" Marco used to be the better brother. Lucio was the one he'd never completely trust because he suspected a trick. However, Marco currently acted more like Lucio. "Because she applied for a job, secretary. She knows I actually required a wife." He blinked and didn't move for a second. Finally, he nodded. "I'll keep your secret, but you must tell her the truth." There was the helpful Marco he remembered. Antonio took a deep breath. "I will, when the time is right, when I'm alone with her." She made him forget the rest of the world. He pressed his lips together and refused to say anything like that to his baby brother. He wasn't soft and never had been so. That would have been out of his normal. Never mind. Marco's gaze narrowed. Never mind what? Now he had to say something, and it wasn't going to be to tell Marco that Kristin made him forget because her lips tasted sweeter than any chocolate. He crossed his arms and chose his words. "She's nice. I like her." Marco covered his lips, though Antonio knew he held back a laugh. "You like her? Well, that is an improvement. I hope she says yes then. Maybe Mom won't demand you marry Sophia." Her name alone made him want to curl up and run, which was exactly what he'd done when they were 13 and his mother had introduced her. "Sophia?" Marco nodded. "Didn't they tell you? She's in the castle, staying with us and still available." Those sounded like his mother's words. There was no way he'd marry Sofia Venko, even if her own mother had been tossed aside because his father chose to marry Anna Camilla. Antonio was not the one to fix a wrong in the past with his own hand. "I'm sure she's hanging out with your friend Victor Amadeus. They seem friends now, and besides, she's the last person I'd ever marry." "They are still friends," Marco continued. "She's been a possibility since you were 13. You must have realized that Mother would bring her here now in desperate times." It was terrifying that his mother didn't realize that he'd never tie the knot with Sophia. His pulse quickened when he thought about Kristin's lips. It was past time he saw her and spent the day convincing her to be with him. "I'm going to see Kristin and tell her about this dinner, and then I'm going to keep her out for the rest of the day. Have fun. I'll entertain her friend." Marco nodded. "Because I'm the good brother. It doesn't hurt that Renee is very pretty." Marco still had 2 years until he would be forced to wed. He had time to have fun and sow his oats. Antonio did not. but it no longer felt like an executioner's blade aimed for his throat. If he married Kristin on his terms, he'd have everything he ever wanted plus more. He had a mission, and nothing was going to stop him. Chapter 7. Kristin placed her pocketbook on a table near the huge bed and twirled around the bedroom. The crystal chandelier's prisms shone brightly from the sunlight outside the huge balcony windows. The white comforter kept the bedroom simple, though the gold-encrusted paint shimmered in the sun. This room was made for a princess. She swallowed and stared at the huge bathroom, which might be bigger than the old farmhouse she'd grown up in. This was how the other 1% lived. She hugged herself and slipped onto the balcony, then went to the door that the maid said connected to Renee's room. She knocked and Renee said, "Come in." Without a hello, Kristin pushed inside and studied the elegant pale gold and pink room her friend was in, with her own private balcony as well. Kristin felt a moment of panic. "Renee, these rooms are huge." Renee came over and pointed to the green trees and small brook outside their balcony doors. "Kristin, stop comparing. This rich, hot prince who trots the globe and can have anyone he wants has asked you to marry him. You are good enough, and you deserve to be happy." Only her best friend could sum up all her doubts and faults like that. They had clearly had too many bottles of wine between them. All her life she'd existed, but here she was in a fantasy. "I've never had anything like this." Renee dragged her toward the balcony and pointed out the river in the distance. "Then it's time to start imagining that this life is possible and that you can have so much more than what you settled for." Adjusting insurance claims from your desk with the partisan walls was draining your soul. Settled was a good word for how she'd been living, afraid to take a risk, alone, determined to take care of herself. She was too young to be as bitter as her mother. With Antonio, she had a chance to share passion, which might grow into something more. But first, she had to be happy with herself. "You're right, I was settling. I had to pay the bills, though. But you know what? Even if I don't get fired, I'm not going back. I'd rather take my chances doing something unexpected and exciting. It is if it steals your dreams, then it's horrible." Renee swung open the balcony doors and pointed to the green hills, rolling river and birds in the sky. It was a perfect day. "What if I don't have any dreams?" "Everyone has dreams. I don't. I don't even really believe in love." "Dreams and love both exist if you just listen." Renee then smiled and leaned against the rails. "Kristin, when is the last time you did anything for yourself?" She crossed her arms and tried to think. She couldn't even remember the last time she had a haircut, to be honest. "I don't know." Before Renee could say anything else, there was a knock on Renee's bedroom door. They both went in and saw the young, dark-haired maid with her head down. "His Royal Highness has requested an audience with you." "We're coming!" Renee shouted with excitement and waved at the maid, who nodded and left. Renee raced forward, but then called behind her. "Kristin, are you ready?" Antonio. He was such a mystery. She wasn't sure what to say or think. The contract burned in her brain. If she thought for 1 minute he might fall in love with her, then she needed to say yes. Despite her mother's many warnings, perhaps Renee was right, and love existed. All the books she'd read made her think so. Today she had to find out. She sped up her step and joined her friend. "Yeah, let's go."
Long down the hall and chased after the maid who kept walking faster to guide them.
Soon they had the maid in a race, until they made it to a huge wooden door. The maid opened the door as she panted for breath, but Kristin swore the maid was laughing.
The moment she and Renee stepped inside, Kristin felt like she was in the ballroom of a royal palace. The chandelier was massive, and the polished wood floors were made for dancing.
The huge room held little furniture, though there was a section behind a curtain where she spied chairs and tables. If the curtain was pulled back, the room might double in size to hold a few hundred people. When she'd met Antonio at the hotel for her interview, she'd thought that place was perfect for a wedding. She had clearly been wrong. Antonio and his brother walked in the door opposite them that showed a large patio area closer to the river. Her heart sped up as she met Antonio's deep brown gaze. The instant he was near her, Antonio placed his hand on the small of her back. He nodded at his brother and another man with them. "Kristin, Miss Brown. First, this is my brother, Marco, and this is his friend, Victor Amadeus." Kristin and Renee bowed their heads in unison. "Your Highness." Marco stepped closer to Renee. None of that. I'm the spare of the spare, and my title is just a formality. He assessed Kristin with a smile. You are both royal guests of our house, and I expect you to call me Marco. Antonio massaged her back so she turned toward him. She immediately asked, How is your father? Getting better, Antonio said. Kristin placed her hand on his heart and smiled. Good. He pulled her a little closer to him. Kristin, I was hoping you were free for lunch? She's free. Renee answered before Kristin could form a sentence. Renee, she said automatically, but her gaze never left Antonio. He truly was handsome and she was lost in her desire to know him better. She nodded. Yes, I'd love to go. Antonio's sexy smile showed off his signature dimple. Unlike in the pictures she'd studied, this time it felt like that dimple was just for her. Her pulse quickened as he kept her close. He then nodded. My mother has invited you both for a formal family dinner. She's offered her assistance in ensuring that you're properly attired. She blinked and swallowed. What? Antonio widened his stance, as if bracing for impact. When we get back, my mother wants to have a selection of clothes available in your room so that you may choose what to wear for dinner. And so he must know it was not polite to assume. How thoughtful. She'd have to work on winning his mother over if she stood any chance here. Kristin turned, shared a quick look with Renee, and then smiled at Antonio. Please tell her thank you. I'm sure that will be very helpful. She had worn her nicest clothes the day of her interview and wasn't sure royals ever wore the same outfit more than once. She hadn't changed from her blue dress because she wasn't sure what to wear next. His shoulders slumped in relief, and he gently patted her back. Are you ready? Marco and Renee walked toward the patio area. Victor walked out of the side door without a goodbye. Kristin stayed beside Antonio, their steps in sync, but she stopped at the door when she heard Renee laugh. Her friend leaned against one door while conversing with the youngest prince, who was doing the same thing on the other panel-style door. She swallowed guilt. I feel bad about leaving Renee. He kept his hand on her back. My brother promised to take Renee on a personalized tour of Avsi. Oh, wow, really? So they were both going to spend the rest of the day with a prince. Good, though she had the better end of the bargain. Antonio made her feel stronger, as if anything was possible just from being next to him. Antonio walked her to a huge door that must be the front entrance of the palace. Servants held it open for them. This way, we're walking? They went down a flight of stairs, but she didn't see a car, a horse, or even bicycles in front of the palace. He pointed down the small green hill. We'll be fine, and your sandals are flat. The village is still enclosed in walls that once protected it over 1,000 years ago. I don't know about you, but I need a little exercise after being cramped on the plane. They never make those pods big enough for comfort. Good point. 2 men in livery of gold and blue opened the black-railed gates for them, and they walked down a small cobblestoned path. Let's see this village. He let go of her back, but offered his hand. She took it, and they walked side by side with trees lining the road without any cars on it. A quarter of the way down, he told her, tomorrow, we'll tour the gardens and plan a nice dinner on the terrace. At some point, she'd talk about that contract again. Right now, she let the sun warming the top of her head keep her calm and collected. That sounds lovely. She glanced at him, and he seemed quiet. She pressed her lips together. So, how is your dad? Did he wake? Yes. His brown eyes had those flecks of green when he stared at her. He woke. Oh wow, good. No wonder you seem lighter. Are you usually the quiet one in the family? I wasn't always brooding. He traced her arm and stopped their walk halfway down the path. I'm happier because you're here. You don't have to say that. If he kissed her again, she'd accept. She was ready to accept more if she was honest, but first she needed to know everything was okay with him and his family. Is your dad going to recover? I think so. He stopped smiling. The doctors are still worried, but more optimistic because he came out of his coma. We're not to put undue stress on him until he's fully recovered. You won't. I'm sure you're right that he has a real chance of being fine. He led her down the hill again. Her heart raced. Can I ask a question? I thought you had 2 brothers? He tilted his head and slowed his pace. Lucio is out of town at the moment. Where is he? Her gaze narrowed, and it wasn't because the sun was in her eyes, not completely. Something sounded off when it came to his brother's whereabouts. But perhaps with the marriage decree, Lucio was out finding his own wife. Without giving her a chance to really feel her surroundings, Antonio led her down a narrow cobblestone path. She slowed and took it all in anyway, because the ancient buildings from the village reminded her of a movie from the medieval time period. But people walked around in modern clothes as they talked to each other and on their phones. Antonio's voice caught her attention as he said, "Lucio's birthday is 9 months after mine, and he doesn't want to wait until the last month and then worry he won't find anyone to marry." Now that this was the topic, she'd ask more about why he chose her. Her pulse spiked, but she pushed forward. "Why did you wait until the last minute?" "I didn't know about the law until 2 months ago, when we came back to power. I certainly never met anyone I wanted to spend my life with." He settled his hands on her hips. The path to the village was dark, covered with trees that blocked the sun, though she knew people must be around. He continued to speak as if he didn't care the paparazzi might snap a picture. "My birthday is fast approaching, and the law says I must marry to produce heirs." Her lips tingled, and her heartbeat grew as she swung their hands in the air. "Which is why you advertised for a secretary, to see if there was anyone out there that might be a good fit." Homini tugged her closer. "Kristin, about that—" "It's okay," she interrupted, but stayed near his massive wall of muscles. She couldn't meet his gaze as she said, "If I'd have known the position was to be your wife, I'd have probably filled it out as some sort of joke." "So would most." It sounded like ice laced his words. He'd not kiss her here, not in this mood. Instead, he led her inside the village. They passed a bakery that made the street smell sweet as sugar cookies, and people talked to their families or carried packages, like any town. She then stopped and stared at a huge church she recognized from online. But the pictures hadn't done the place justice. In Avs, the church was supposedly built on the spot where the Virgin Mary made it snow in the middle of summer, as a miraculous sign. Now stood a medieval steeple, but the walls were older and columns gave away the Roman architectural style of the base. She touched the cold marble wall. "This cathedral is beautiful." He brushed his hand on the stone next to hers. "This is the place where Mary blessed my family and told us to build a cathedral by making it snow only on this holy ground." She had read that online, but she wanted him to tell her more. Kristin had read that the church was called Our Lady of the Snow. The article claimed that in the middle of summer, the Roman couple who wanted a baby asked Mary for help, and she made it snow to show where to build a cathedral. Antonio's use of the word us made her wonder, but nobody could trace their ancestry that far back. "I read about the history online when I applied for your job, since working for you meant I'd be spending time here. I've always wanted to travel and see the world. Are you related to the Roman couple?" "Yes, they are direct ancestors." He slid his hands over the silky fabric of her dress, settling his firm grip on her hips and brought her close, almost nose to nose. Her heart was steady and sure. "You can see all of that and more. As my wife, I am tempted." She closed her eyes and let the feel of being in his arms sway her. He then whispered, "Good, because I haven't started my persuasion yet." His lips met hers and she melted. He was everything she dared dream of as perfect. Once he ended the kiss, she stayed in his arms. "Isn't marrying a commoner forbidden?" "No, but if it was," he kissed her cheek. "So what? I like forbidden fruit, but wouldn't you have to marry a royal first?" "My ancestors made no rules about that. In fact, a few of the supposed nobles got the girl pregnant first, and if she had a son, then they'd marry her." On the street behind them, she heard people whisper, and one of them called her a capitalist. At home, if someone insulted her, she generally avoided the person, but here she felt the conversation meant something else. She lowered her head. "I don't want to interfere with your local politics." Antonio's face was red, but he stepped away and led her into a market street where people were buying from shops on a cobblestone street. "I think you being an American will increase my standing in our local politics, but don't worry about it. What would you like to do or see next?" If she was with Renee, they'd dash into the quaint shops to see what treasures were to be discovered. With Antonio, she wished they were locked in a room together. She wanted to intimately know all of him. But suddenly, she was unsure what to say, so she patted her stomach. "Okay, I'd rather worry about lunch. I'm famished." "This way then." He led her into a small restaurant. "This is Jaka's. Don't be shocked, but we put dandelion in our salads here." That didn't sound very extreme, but comfortingly familiar. He opened the door for her. "And perhaps you'll want to try something with chestnuts too." Fruits and berries would be staples of the past. Somehow she had to turn the conversation to their marriage in the here and now. It was time she took a chance, starting with something new for lunch. Chapter 8. Kristin placed her blue cloth napkin on the table and smiled at the waitress who took away the empty dessert plate. Antonio had been attentive and sweet the entire meal. Through salad, pasta, and chocolate cake, now she was hungry for more than food. She ignored the buzz in her veins that begged for alone time where he might kiss her. The problem with a restaurant was they were in public and people stared at both of them. "I'm surprised no one is asking for your autograph or trying to get a picture with you." The server came to refill their waters. "The village is quite used to me at this point, and my people respect my privacy as I respect theirs. Being royal is a round-the-clock lifestyle, but then Jaka, the owner of this restaurant, also has around-the-clock responsibilities." Antonio stopped the server and asked, "Before you go, do you like working here?" The waitress kept her head down but nodded at the same time. "Your Highness, Jaka has trained me in service, paying me so that I can support my family in the village. We are all voting for you to continue your reign." She held the water pitcher tight in her hands. "Under the communist regime, I was stuck in the countryside, unable to support myself or my family on the allotted land no matter how hard I worked." Antonio nodded and gave her that royal smile of his that included that dimple. "Please send Jaka our regards." The food had been a mix of Italianish spices and some new to her palate. She picked up her glass and folded her other hand over her knee so she wouldn't touch Antonio. Yes, lunch was great. He paid the bill. She gulped her water. Once he was done, he stood and offered his hand. "I want to show you something." "Okay, let's go." She jumped out of her seat to follow and quickly walked beside him again. His hand in hers felt right. Every part of her body urged her to say yes and marry him. Renee was right in that she shouldn't doubt herself. She'd lose the chance of a lifetime, but more important, she had to listen to her heart. Over the last 3 months, she'd studied up on Antonio, and she'd slowly fallen for his smiles, his charity work, his philosophy. Now she saw how kind he truly was in person. Perhaps her crush on him was transforming to something more. He guided her to the village retaining wall, and then down a dirt path that went toward a stand of oak trees. The village was charming. It is home. The farther away from the village, the bustling town center was replaced with birds chirping in the trees. She squeezed his hand. "Where are we going?" He pointed past a tree, not that she could see anything. "A spot I have claimed as my own since we moved here." Her eyes widened. "How long ago was that?" "Well, it's over 10 years now, since my father was brought back as the king." He jetted them off in a new direction that seemed untouched. Her feet crunched into the grass as they went off the path. She stayed close to him as they walked into the darker forest. "That sounds interesting." He held back a branch for her to pass by. "I think so. This way." "This is the same wall that is part of the village?" She studied the white stone. They could probably have stayed on the path, but the shortcut through the woods made her more aware of him. He pushed open a gate and led her to a massive oak door that he unlocked and then pocketed the key. "Yes. Centuries ago, we had guards stationed at various checkpoints in case there was an attack on our village." He pushed open the wooden door that looked medieval, complete with iron brackets. "And now, we have satellites and drones." He winked and went inside the dark room. She took a deep breath and thanked her lucky stars she'd trusted him enough to follow him into the woods. This place was living history. She followed him and blinked in the darkness. She heard the sound of a switch, and then light illuminated from a central overhead chandelier. Clearly, the people in Avsi loved the light fixtures. The couch and living area all housed furniture she'd seen in museum showrooms. Antonio said, "Anyhow, this is where the guard would have been stationed."
She stared at the rustic decor and the chunky, masculine furniture. The walls were clean and the hall had a scent of a hunting lodge, all dust and earth. What is it used for now? He scooted 2 chairs together and dusted off the brown leather couch. Right now, not much.
"When we give tours, this might be a good place to start. but we don't have much of a tourist industry set up yet. My brothers are against this idea. They like having our own space, but I want to bring commerce to the town. It truly is beautiful. He straightened and she tilted her head. He'd taken off his tailored suit jacket before leaving the palace. His black slacks and polo shirt placed him in the wrong century for the guardhouse, and yet he still fit here. He was so tall that his brown hair nearly touched the chandelier. He truly was handsome, and this felt secluded. So, is this your favorite spot? He tugged her arm toward a door, which opened to a huge empty room that wasn't in use at all. He flipped on a light and said, "Almost. Come over here. Where are we?" She looked around the space. This is where the guards ate together, trained together. It's the old barracks, though there was a woman murdered right here over 200 years ago. What happened? She peeked over her shoulder but saw no obvious ghost. He stilled and looked around the room. My great-great-grandmother was murdered in this room by a man who was after her throne. Perhaps the people wanted their freedom from tyranny and rules of kings. Her own father would never approve of the decadence. What happened? Antonio crossed his arms and stared at the chandelier. She was a widow, and her son was less than 5. A fortune hunter thought she was easy prey until she said no to his proposal. She came here for protection, but found all her guards dead from poison. Then, when she fired her gun at the villain, he killed her. She shook her head and backed out of the room. At least her son was okay. He was well guarded in the palace. He closed the door to the grand hall, and they returned to the large open space with the hunting lodge feel. So, the communist rulers ignored this place, but my brothers and I loved being together here since we moved and lost our friends in England. She noticed 2 other closed doors but avoided asking what the rooms were used for. She glanced at the 2 straight-backed chairs, an old brown couch and a large red armchair with thick cushions and a slightly sagging seat positioned in front of a large fireplace. She pressed her lips together and walked toward the couch. "Who gets the big chair?" He laughed as she sat, then he joined her. "When I'm here by myself, I can read by the fire, though when my brothers come, it's whoever gets here first that claims the throne." He said throne like it was an in-family joke, though the red armchair had thick cushions and was probably comfortable. "It's nice." He leaned backward on the couch and stretched his arm behind her. "This is also the only place I know where servants aren't watching me, and I can really be alone." She blinked and gazed into his eyes as her heart began to beat a little faster. "So no one will come in?" He leaned forward and cupped her face in his hands. "No. All during lunch I was thinking of a place where I could do this." His kiss left her body with tingles of anticipation. She wanted him, but he ended the moment too fast. She licked her lips. What a good idea. Hun let her go and folded his hands together. "How can I convince you to marry me? Throw out the contract terms." She blinked, not voicing those words, but she placed her hand on his arm and asked, "Why did you stop? You know, when we were kissing on the plane."
He took a deep breath and held up 2 fingers. 2 things. Her pulse quickened and she scooted closer to him. She'd been ready to make love on the flight. She tightened her grip around his arm. His slightly calloused fingers brushed against her arm and left a trail of electric need in its path. He tugged her closer to him, as if they were discussing something secret and forbidden.
Renee was downstairs, and when I make love to you, I don't want to be interrupted. Oh, true. Renee probably would have heard something. Though luxurious, it was still a plane. She hadn't even thought about it because she was too wrapped up in him. She nodded. "And 2? He reached out and brushed her hair back from her face. "2 is that I don't want a one-night stand with you. I asked you to marry me." Oh, now she'd had less than 4 boyfriends in her life, and none of them had left her with spine-tingling, must-know-more-about-him sensations. All had been sweet, but she couldn't remember a single name at this moment. Her body needed Antonio's touch, her cheeks flushed. It's sexy to be wanted, to know you want marriage, but I'd also like to know we're a match, physically. Attraction is a good thing. He lowered his head. She closed her eyes and pressed her lips out for a kiss. He didn't disappoint. His touch sent awareness through every cell inside her. She ached for him. After a few minutes of intense kisses, she climbed on top of his lap with her knees on either side of his hips, so she could be nose to nose with him, again. Her dress inched up her thighs, baring her skin. Wind rustled branches outside, but inside she was warm and toasty in his arms. He rested his hands on her hips, and once the kiss ended, said, Shall we get you out of your clothes? Agreed. She didn't have to say anything. Instead, she stood, but he reached under her legs, swept her off her feet, and carried her into the other room. She gazed at a full-size 4-poster bed with an emerald silk comforter, a nightstand, and a dark wood dresser beneath a curtained window. In the next room, she spotted a gleaming white bathroom that seemed modern, not that she intended to check right now. This retreat of his was complete with everything. She hugged him closer, lust at the hunger in his gaze. Her breath caught as she stood before him so his eyes could undress her first. He took off his shoes and polo. She toed off her flats. He wagged his finger for her to stay close. Come here. Her body was already his, so it was time to show him her feelings too. She wrapped her arms around his waist, but then he said, "Take off your clothes," slowly. In this moment, she felt powerful, sensual, desired. She played with the hem of her dress, slowly revealing more leg, hip, stomach, and breast as she pulled it over her head. Every cell in her body felt alive as she knew he watched her. His shortened breaths when he saw her in her black lace bra and panties made every second worth savoring. He traced her skin and it felt like she was a flower about to bloom. He stared at her breasts and said, "Take that off. I want to see all of you." "Likewise," she said, and he tugged his slacks off and threw them in one perfect swift motion. She unclasped her bra, and her breasts stayed pert for his every attention. He stroked her nipples. His touch was at first light, but became firm. She studied his body, muscles all over, her breasts heavy with need. "Look at me," he insisted. She stared into his eyes, brown with flecks of green. The sensation of being his and enjoying every second coursed through her veins. "Take me, Antonio." He kissed her neck and she backed up toward the bed, her legs bumping the mattress. She put her arms around his shoulders and felt his hands on her hips, and knew without a doubt she'd say yes. "I will marry you." Chapter 9. Antonio held Kristin close to his bare chest, their bodies cooling after intense love play. He'd brought her to the guardhouse to share his past, to convince her with words to be his wife. But their physical attraction had overcome conversation. Antonio's body still felt relaxed. Everything about Kristin was better than he'd expected. Before he met her, he had read her personality profile at least 100 times while he avoided looking at her picture too much. He had her entire life history in his computer files to gather everything he could about her. He had trusted his logic skills far more than physical, and he'd dismissed caring as an essential component to his would-be wife. He had gathered files on about 10 women who might match before he used his last demand, her physical looks, to truly decide. His brother Lucio had been the opposite, and claimed he needed to have a physical connection if he must be married. Kristin was the logical choice, and even more so now that he understood they could be like this. Her naked body next to his sent embers of desire through him, even after what they'd just shared. Reluctantly, he sat up and tugged on his pants. "We should probably head back to the palace." "Yes, Antonio." Kristin slipped out of the bed. She walked to the modern bathroom attached to the room to get ready. They had already washed and cleaned off, but the dawn of evening meant they could dawdle, and holding her in his arms was more pleasant than he expected. Now that she wasn't in his arms as he tucked in his shirt, he already felt a loss. He lifted his eyebrow. "Kristin? Yes?" She tied her sneakers, then flipped her hair over her shoulder to glance at him. She truly glowed. His heart whispered that he wanted no other bride. He slipped his black shoes on as he felt a genuine smile grow on his lips. "You seem happier." "I am." She winked at him and checked herself in the bathroom mirror so that her clothes were all straight. He joined her by the mirror and took her hand in his, acknowledging the spark he'd felt with no other. "Good. Want to give a hint on what I must do to get you to marry me now?" She looked up at him with her face still flushed from their afternoon. Her smile was hypnotic. "Ask me." "What?" He blinked. Had he heard her correctly? He swallowed and tried not to move. Her voice grew softer. "Ask me right now." He went down on one knee on the bathroom floor. She swayed and stared at him with wide blue eyes. She was the best thing that ever happened in his life, and his chest puffed with pride. "Kristin Wells, will you marry me?" She nodded with her eyes misting and tugged for him to stand. The moment he did, she threw her arms around him and said, "Yes, really?" He hugged her waist, lifting her off the ground. Kristin was his now and for the rest of their lives. She brushed his jaw and laughed. "Why do you sound surprised? I couldn't say no. He put her back on the ground, but his heart still beat faster than normal. I haven't been able to think straight since you spilled your pocketbook in my office. You bent over and I saw the sliver of delicate skin at your throat, the way you blinked behind your glasses, the peak of thigh when you crossed your legs and your dress inched up. Another woman might have run from embarrassment, but you held your own and captured my admiration. I had to choose you. She tilted her head, and somehow she made him feel alive in a way he never had been. If being with you is like this, then we should be married. He brushed her hair away from her soft face and inhaled her rosy scent, though she wore no perfume, and then lowered his head for a kiss. She tasted better than any other woman, like spice and wine and chocolate. Somehow he'd found the woman that men whispered about as special. Their fingers interlaced and they walked to the door that he held open for her. We'll stop at the local jeweler, if you'd like, and you can pick out your ring. I'm sure my mother mentioned some ancient ring I'm to give you once we tell her over dinner. Outside, she shivered as if she was colder in the evening here, even though it was summer, and stayed closer to him. I'd like one that you bought for me as something private between us. They walked without speaking as their feet crunched against the overgrown grass until they made it back to the dirt path and then the cobblestone street. He held her close and wanted to ensure they stayed in this bubble where no one else mattered but the two of them. Kristin, I really didn't think you'd be this perfect. Her laughter echoed on the quiet streets of the village. Where was everybody? Even at night, the village always had streets full of people, often reveling as they went to one of the restaurants or late-night bars. Strange that everyone was inside and no one was here. His body became more rigid, and his awareness of the surroundings grew. Kristin kept her voice low. Does your kingdom have a curfew at dusk? So she felt it too. Something was wrong. Everything was too quiet. His hands went into fists from the quietness of the street that usually had vendors everywhere. Crime is usually imported. We're a small country. It can happen anywhere. But I have a feeling this is about my family. Night was almost here, but at least the jewelry store had its lights on. He opened the door and heard the bell ding overhead as the only noise in the area. His gut churned, and he ushered Kristin inside and off the street. Shall we? The elderly store owner, David, had tears dampening his face when he came over to them and cried even more. Antonio's entire body felt tight. The old man mopped his eyes. Your Highness, Prince Antonio, we were so worried about you. Why? He heard the edge in his voice. Everything had been fine this afternoon. If something happened to his father now, he'd feel guilty for stealing away for a few hours. Kristin squeezed his hand. What's wrong? The jeweler then cried more. We heard what happened at the palace. The reports must have been wrong. No, something happened. He said a prayer his father was safe. What reports? The older gentleman leaned against the glass counter that protected his jewels. Communists stormed the palace and have your family as hostages. We're all waiting for news. No, his father had just woken from a coma. He couldn't be moved or startled, or he might relapse. Antonio never should have left the palace. His entire body tensed. I have to get back now. I'm coming with you. Kristin held his hand in her tight grip. He thought to argue, but remembered that her protective instinct was at a 97 percentile, which wouldn't let her back down. The jeweler locked the door behind them, and Antonio, with Kristin, marched up the street toward the palace. She ran with him and never asked to slow down. As they neared the gate, he told her, trying again to keep her safe, I'll need you to stay with the guards. She wrapped her other arm in his. Antonio, my friend is in there. I'm helping. The last thing he needed was for anyone to hurt her too. Kristin was his future. It's my family, Kristin. My father is gravely ill. I can't worry about you too. She didn't have a chance to respond because the doors were opened for him in the barracks, and he called out, Guards, Your Highness, this way. A lieutenant saluted and then marched forward. Everyone stood at attention as he strode down the hall. Once he made it to General Bobek, the man said, We're happy you're here. His neutral expression gave no emotion away. The general marched him to a wall of monitors where he saw the elite force mobilized near doors and various rooms in the house. Bobek hit a switch, and one monitor became his father's sick room. At least his father was still alive and in his bed, but who knew what was planned? Bobek said. From the video feed, someone has tied your mother to her chair and your father is too weak to move. The enemy was in the room with his parents, but he had no idea where his brother or Renee were. Lucio was out of the country. Babek turned to him, his hands behind his back. "We have a plan." Antonio read the three-phase army plan to extract his parents and his brother in 2 different missions at the same time, which meant Marco wasn't with his parents. The guards were in position. His heart beat fast as he asked, "Where are Marco and Renee?" "Here." The general motioned to another monitor. "They are tied together. We have to move now, sire, if we have any chance of catching them before they secure the palace and cut off our entry points. We were desperately trying to locate you. They are in bed." Kristin pointed to the screen and it brought him back. That someone would hurt his family made his blood boil. His father was a good man and always did what he thought was best for his small kingdom. He'd let the black hole that wanted to consume him get him later. "We found 10 traitors within the castle. Our men are stationed near 4 entry points where they can be apprehended. The enemy is trying to secure the doors," the general added. "There are only 2 traitors with your brother. The other 6 are closer to your parents. 2 more are with Sophia." The plan called for 3 major groups to be stationed in unsecured locations and 3 minor groups to block any escape attempts. He had read fast and approved. "How many guards do we have?" Babek stood at attention. "You have 1,000 men mobilized and armed already." He pointed to the monitor. "I want 100 extra men dispatched to free my brother and Renee, our guest. Send another 100 to get my mom's guest, Sophia. Then I want 100 marching with me to my parents after the Special Forces unit goes in. The doctors specifically said no stress on my father, so quiet is the best option if possible. Have the rest mobilized and ready to charge into the communist headquarters near the library once I enter the palace." He glanced at Kristin. This was his family, and she was now included in this mess. He then told Babek, "I am going to meet these communists, now." Babek made the call. Special forces were headed toward his father's sick room. He turned on his heel and marched out of the barracks. Outside, the general would have men follow him, but Antonio had to see his father for himself. Near the door, he turned to Kristin. "This is political. Please stay here." She walked ahead of him and tugged on his arm. "If I'm to be your wife, then I should be with you. What you stand for, I represent the same thing." He knew he'd not talk her out of this. He trusted his closest military guards were loyal to him, but no one knew she was to be his bride, not yet. He followed the general, Kristin at his side. "No, you're American to them. I'll need you surrounded with guards." "Good." She nodded and walked with him down the hall with guards flanking them on all sides. They stopped outside his parents' room, and he heard men speaking tersely. Neither of them said anything else as they waited. The general wore a green-on-green uniform and stood alert and ready. Babek spoke into the mic at his lapel, which reverberated in the headset Antonio had gotten at the barracks so they could communicate. "They are planning to kill your family and throw the country back to a point where most of us went without basic supplies. Stay where you are until we secure the king and queen." He was one door away from his mother. Part of him wanted to run inside, but it was smarter to move with the army at his command. He tapped his chest and nodded to Babek, speaking into his own mic. "Send in the storm." "What's the storm?" Kristin stood stiffly beside him. Babek sent the signal. Glass shattered and shots were heard. He wanted to throw open the doors and pull his parents to safety. Anything might happen, but his father's lessons about how a future king must always be prepared forced him to hold still despite how the little boy inside him begged to save his mother. "The men in the military are equipped to remove my parents from harm while we wait." "Got it." Kristin's face paled. More shouts of the military, but one shout of no reverberated in the air. Anyone looking at him would see a cool, composed prince of the realm. He didn't allow a single muscle on his body to tremble. He swallowed as the rumbling noises behind the door quieted. "Kristin, my dad is ill and this stress can be bad for him. He could relapse or worse. He doesn't need this." She curled her hand in his. "He'll be okay." Silence echoed through the hall of the West Wing where his parents' private tower was located. He nodded at the men behind him. Babek waited by the door and went in the room first, then Antonio and Kristin. The moment he entered, his gaze locked on his mother, Queen Anna Camilla Aussa. She sat on the bed with his father and nodded at him, tears of joy in her eyes. He wanted to run over and hug them both, grateful they were alive. Instead, he asked the guard, "Report." The leader of the Special Forces unit pointed toward the group that was tied on the ground near the servants' door. "We have the suspects. One of them began to touch your father's fore, but a nurse struggled with him and prevented any poisons until we fired our shots. The nurses are checking everything thoroughly now." Fire raged through him. If anyone hurt his father, he'd bring back public executions with an axe. Kristin's hand in his was the only calming influence. He was known as the cold one in the family, but right now he was furious. He gave a single nod. "I'll speak to them." "Over here." The guard walked him the 2 feet and stared at the 2 young men who couldn't be more than 18 years old. He had never seen either of them until now, so they were probably foreign-born. He damned the men who dared to harm his family. He let go of Kristin's hand and crossed his arms, his head high in the air. "Who are the cowards that tried to assassinate a king when he was sick?" One of the blonde, blue-eyed boys answered. "You were supposed to be in the castle too." A guard handed him the man's driver's license, which had his identification on it. Antonio knelt down to stare into the man's eyes. "You're the leader here, Mikel?" Mikel snorted. "You betrayed us all when you brought an American home." If he wasn't the prince, he'd have murdered the man with his own hands. Instead, he stayed still, though his hands curled into fists. "You went after a sick old man. Your heartless attack destroys any chance at martyrdom among the people." He then addressed the guard. "Get them out of my sight. Put them in Iron 7. "Is that the dungeon?" Kristin asked. "No, that was barbaric. Iron 7 is a prison." Once he turned, he saw that Kristin hugged her waist and stared at him. He returned to her side, kissed her forehead, and placed his hand on the small of her back. She dropped her hands and went with him as he urged her forward. His mother stood to greet him. He spoke formally. "Kristin Wells, this is my mother, Queen Anna Camilla, and my father, King Leopoldo, regents of Avs. Nice to meet you," Kristin answered shyly. His mother kissed her cheek and then hugged him. The world was right. He had everyone he ever wanted, and there was no way he'd lose them. Not now or ever. Chapter 10. Kristin held her tongue. She had no idea what to say in Antonio's family discussion because she didn't know any of them. So she stuck to his side and waited, listening. The room had probably been white and sterile, but the walls were now stained with bullet holes, and the air smelled of gunpowder. Her eyes burned, but the closer she came to the king in his white sheets, the more she realized that he was untouched. Antonio's shoulders were square, but she could tell he wanted to hug them all again. Yes, she might be reading into his body language, but his shoulders caved in and then straightened too many times to mean anything else. He crossed his arms as if to stop himself from showing emotion. "Mother. Father. I'm sorry that I wasn't here. You led our rescue." His mother reached out and pressed her hand on his cheek. "We're glad you weren't here." His father, the king, settled back and closed his eyes as if to rest, more peaceful. Kristin fixed his blanket so he'd be covered to his thin shoulders. Antonio glanced down and spoke to his mother. "Only because I wasn't home." His mother reached out and took her hand as well. "As I said, we're glad you weren't. I hope you and Kristin had a good time exploring the kingdom." Antonio waited for her to stand next to him. The moment she did, he placed his hand on her hip and stared at his mother. "Mother, Kristin's agreed to marry me." The queen smiled at them both. Perfect. Kristin's entire body had tensed, expecting another reaction. She swallowed and said, "Really? Those men came in to kill you. They said I was American. Is there a revolution happening here?" "The men were not our citizens," Antonio answered fast. His mother shrugged and then motioned for one of the nurses to come in to check on the king. She watched the nurse like a hawk, though she said in a bright tone, "Tonight, we will have the official announcement of your engagement made. Have you selected one of the dresses I left for you yet?" "No." Kristin hadn't even thought about clothes or dinner. Adrenaline rushed into her veins from the danger that had just happened. Clothes seemed banal. "I haven't gone back to my room." The queen turned toward Kristin as if this was the most important thing to do. "I need you to select one immediately and tell the servant I've assigned to your chamber. She'll inform me of your choice." Antonio made to leave, but Kristin pressed her heels together. "Wait," Antonio paused. "For what?" Clothes were the least important thing to Kristin's mind. Her heart still beat wildly. 10 men just stormed the castle. You're still going to have a formal dinner? None of this made sense. Shouldn't they be worried about more insurrection and danger and what to do about it? Queen Ana Camila said, "One must keep up appearances for the people. We have a very important election at stake." Antonio interjected. Clearly they had help from someone inside, Mother. His mother nodded. Corba was one of them. You saw him on the ground. Who is Corba? Kristin asked. Antonio's face went white. No, Corba was not on the ground. He turned toward her and said, Corba was a trusted servant of my mother's. This conversation was important. She held her breath as the queen explained. Corba let them in and locked the staff out. Please have Marco and Sofia check in with me. I want to see my son. Of course. Antonio hugged her goodbye, then placed his hand on Kristin's back and led her toward the door. Mother, I know the guards are here, but stay vigilant until Corba is found. Queen Ana Camila sat down next to the king on the bed, who roused briefly from his slumber and smiled at his wife. Yes, of course, she said. Order will be maintained and your bride must look angelic for tonight's live feed. Have the guards check everyone before they enter her room, but hair, makeup, everything must be in order. We only have a few hours, so Kristin had marching orders, or so it felt. Perhaps when things were less frazzled, they'd have a conversation where they could get to know each other. If she intended to live here, she'd need the queen to be an ally, if not a friend. She followed Antonio's silent directions and left. This time he walked her out, closed the door and closed his eyes in the hall. She stood next to him and massaged his shoulder, unsure how to help. His family might still be in danger. He hugged her and she stayed in his arms. Minutes passed and neither of them moved until the grandfather clock dinged in the hall. He let her go and led her toward a stairwell. She looked around and had no idea where they were. Can you take me to my room? I'm afraid I'd get lost if I tried to find my way. Sure. Then I'll go find my brother. He guided her down a flight of stairs. This is the shortcut. She couldn't imagine a longer way. The halls were all enormous enough to house a giant party. They passed a huge grand piano and the crystal and gold chandeliers more than made up for missing art. He stopped right before the gilded door of her room. She knew this was it, for now. She tugged on his hip to keep him close, but she also wanted to talk to her friend who had been with his brother this afternoon. I want to check on Renee and it seems hair and makeup will be there for me. He traced her cheek and smiled. You'll have to look the part of princess for a while. I'm so glad you're here. His touch reminded her of why she'd said yes to his proposal. She hugged him. Then it's worth it. Once she let go, he claimed her lips and for that second, the rest of the world dissipated. All that mattered was that she was in his arms. Hurry back to me, Antonio. She brushed the 5 o'clock shadow along his jaw with gentle fingers and let the fullness she felt settle inside her heart. Renee would say that Antonio was a keeper. Her friend loved her slang. She turned to go into her room, but he caught her shoulder. I am sorry I never bought you a ring. Seriously, it wasn't a big deal. His family mattered more. She shrugged. Don't worry. Go find your brother and make sure he's okay. He leaned forward and kissed her cheek. Kristin, I will come to you later to escort you to dinner. Her cheek tingled where his mouth had touched as he stepped away. She couldn't do anything but smile at him. For some reason, Prince Antonio Aussa wanted to marry her, Kristin Wells. Her heartbeat grew faster. I look forward to it. Guards walked down the hall in double file. They slowed when the commander of the group realized they both watched. His hand lingered on hers for a moment and slowly walked toward the troops. She slipped inside and closed the door to her room. 2 full closets on wheels, like something a bellhop might bring to a hotel room, held dozens of dresses. She traced the soft fabrics with her hand and never imagined owning half of this, but then the side door opened and Renee came inside. Kristin dropped everything and rushed across the hall to hug her friend. Renee, how are you? She let her go and searched her friend for signs of torture or captivity. Her wrists and ankles seemed fine, but she'd been tied up, a hostage, and sleeping with Marco. Renee looked at her best friend with tears in her eyes and said, You were so lucky you weren't in the palace when this happened. Where is Sophia? Who? Kristin had a vague memory of Antonio and General Babic discussing a woman with that name. Renee made sure the door behind Kristin was closed and they were alone. Kristin's adrenaline built up as Renee confided, I met her when you went to lunch. Did Antonio not mention her? Her name hadn't come up in conversation exactly. She'd overheard it. She shrugged. She must be a nice older lady then. I know Antonio sent troops to retrieve her. Renee shook her head. She's not old. She's a beautiful woman. You know the Queen wants Antonio to marry, quickly. I said yes. Kristin hugged her waist, nervous. Queen Anna Camilla had shaken her hand and said she was good with Antonio marrying her. Was Sophia a backup plan? She'd have to ask Antonio for details. Later, Renee began to search the dresses on the rack for something to wear as well. Both ladies wore the same size. Well, Sophia made it clear that she wanted to marry Antonio. She said that. Kristin took Renee's hand off the blue silk sheath, demanding her best friend's attention. Renee tilted her head in thought. No. She said a Prince Aussa, but not exactly your Antonio. Renee lifted a green floor-length gown from the selection. What do you think? Kristin wrinkled her nose at the dress. Something else was going on. Renee never avoided gossip. Kristin crossed her arms and tried to understand. Perhaps this was to do with sleeping with Antonio's brother. Maybe your date this afternoon then. You never told me how it was with Marco? Renee's face flushed crimson. How it was? How did you know? Know what? Kristin asked and stayed close as her friend tried to check out the dresses again. Nothing. Renee continued to flip through the choices. Kristin didn't even look at the clothes, but zeroed in on Renee. You're bright red. Did you have a good time? Antonio said Marco was going to show you the countryside. So the rebels came at the wrong moment. Renee bit her lower lip and closed her eyes. We were naked, in bed. All the blood drained from Kristin's face as she felt cold and her skin was clammy. Those horrible men stripped you. Renee deserved so much better. She covered her lips with her hand. Renee's blush reached her forehead and down her throat. No, we were taken prisoner the way they found us. Found in bed with Marco. You and Marco? Renee never had one-night stands, ever. In fact, she avoided any encounter that might lead to the situation. She never drank in public. She always had Kristin call at 11 o'clock on any date and pretend there was an emergency at home. On the plane to Absey, she'd admitted to feelings about their neighbor. Kristin narrowed her gaze. But I thought you were in love with Greg? Renee dropped her hands to her sides. A man who doesn't notice me? That's nothing to love. She twirled away from the dresses and leaned against the four-poster bed. Marco is sexy, not looking to put a ring on anyone's finger, and oh yeah, a prince. He's hard to say no to, when he's exactly what I want. Anyhow, let's not talk about this. I am so glad that you agreed to marry Antonio. Did he give you a ring? We were going to shop for one when we found out you'd been taken hostage. Kristin had so many questions for Renee. Sleeping with Marco was so unlike her. She was usually so responsible and never did anything outside of the lines. Renee then stared at her with renewed interest. And you were gone most of the day, longer than just lunch in the village. Kristin felt her cheeks heat, and this time she checked the dresses to avoid Renee's curiosity. Antonio and I came to an understanding. Renee took her hand and started to laugh. You mean he took you to bed? Was he amazing like his brother? A giggle escaped her lips, and she squealed a little. It was nice to share secrets with her friend. So I said yes, and now I'm to tell the Queen what dress I will choose. Tell the Queen? Are you sure you are up to living this life? The palace attack was unlikely to happen again, and security would be tightened. She'd witnessed the army and guards firsthand. It had thrilled her to see that Antonio had the respect of the general. In Miami, the police are everywhere. We don't even think about it. I expect I'll be fine, probably because they are around. The guards were already drawing up plans to rescue everyone when we came into the palace. Renee hugged her. You are braver than anyone else I know, Kristin. I don't often say that, but you might need strength tonight, at dinner. I'll be there, but you're on a whole other level. Oh, and wear the red one. We both know that color looks great on you. Renee, I'm glad you came, Kristin said as someone knocked on the door. Even if you did get tied up, Renee answered. Me too. Women came in with hair supplies and makeup boxes. They set up in chairs near the huge mirror on the wall. Kristin would dress fabulous and look the part of future princess. She was worthy of Antonio, and tonight they'd tell the world that they were engaged. Chapter 11. The red fabric hugged Kristin's waist. The silk felt smooth and showed her breasts in the sleeveless floor-length dress, but everything clung in all the right places while still giving her a sense of modesty. A knock sounded on the chamber door. She checked herself in the mirror one more time. Would Antonio like it? Was it Antonio? It was time for him to arrive. Surely he'd walk right in. Minutes passed and she had no idea what to do. She stared at the door and wondered if a servant might escort her to dinner like they had for Renee 10 minutes ago. Suddenly another knock sounded. For some reason Antonio hadn't kept his word to come and get her. She opened the door. A dark-haired man in a blue and gold uniform stood close to her. The prince has asked that you come this way, Miss Wells. All the servants she'd seen in the quarter so far were women. Her skin prickled as she slipped outside and closed the door behind her. No guard waited in the hall, as instructed by Antonio earlier. I've not seen you before. I work in service of Her Highness, Queen Anna Camilla. The man walked beside her a few steps. Kristin remembered how the maid had insisted she be in front of her and Renee earlier, as if that was proper protocol. Her stomach churned, indicating that something was wrong. She slowed her step and asked, "What's your name?" "Corba, Miss Wells." He directed her farther down the hall. Her ears burned as she jumped toward the next door in the hall. "I almost forgot. Renee has my earrings. I'm going to slip into my friend's room. Please wait out here." She went in, then locked the door before he could say a word. Her heart raced. Antonio and his mother were looking for a Corba. She raced to the balcony and then her room. Antonio said he'd be here. She locked the balcony door and her front door. Antonio said he'd come. She hugged her waist and massaged the goosebumps off her arms. She called out to the green and white walls, "Where are you?" She went to her pocketbook and found her cell phone. Of course, service was unavailable within the palace. She dropped it back in her bag, but then immediately grabbed it again. Perhaps she had Wi-Fi. She quickly pulled up the email used for her appointment with Antonio and sent him a message. Next, she sent one to Renee. She paced the room, hoping they'd check their messages before the dinner. Would Corba try to break in? Within moments, she heard footsteps and guards walk in loud formation outside in the hall. They stopped in front of her chamber. The key turned the lock and she stood, stiff and unsure. She saw the black leather of a shoe and immediately knew who it was. She rushed over and threw herself in Antonio's arms despite the gold-encrusted prince suit that reminded her a bit of an animated prince from the movies. "Antonio!" He hugged her, then kissed her fast. She felt protected in his arms. "I got your message. Are you okay?" There's nobody out in the hall. Her heart still raced, but she closed her eyes and remembered how close she'd been to following the man behind the hostage attacks to who knows where. She rocked on her feet. "Corba came to get me. I locked myself in." He massaged her shoulders. "Where were the guards?" "Good question." She swayed, but balanced against his arm. "I don't know. I'll find out." He held her until she calmed. Then he offered his hand and motioned with his head toward the door. "This way." She stared at the two men now stationed in the hall. She wished she remembered the faces of the ones from earlier, but her memory was a blur. "Don't you want to call the guards over and ask?" He shook his head and led her away. Once they were in the next hall, he whispered so only she heard him. "I trust Babak, but I think another general is in league with Corba. Let's get you with the rest of my family. You'll be safe."
Why didn't you come earlier as you promised?
The question came out of her lips before she had a chance to think. Her face felt hot, but she stared ahead. He took a deep breath and then put her hand on his heart. "You're right. I promised I would. Then nothing might have happened to my gorgeous fiancé. My mother had me go find her guest, and then I had to bring her to my mother, who then never stopped talking to me. I should have left them earlier and come straight here. If you had then, maybe I'd have followed Corba without questioning. So I'm glad you came now." She unlaced her fingers off his chest and pressed her lips together. Renee had said Sophia was beautiful. She swallowed. Who is Sophia? He reached out and took her arm to direct her to the door. No one important, and now is not the time for her. Let's go find Babik and then go to dinner. She tugged her hand back and stood taller. Sophia must be important. Kristin had to know, so she crossed her arms. Who is she? Antonio's jaw clenched and he closed the door he had slightly opened, speaking just to her. Someone my mother has been throwing in my path since I was 13. We don't fit. If his mother wanted this woman not only as Antonio's wife, but princess, and someday queen, she had to be more than just acceptable. The last thing she wanted to be was surprised or jealous at dinner. She dropped her arms to the side, but her foot tapped the plush carpet that ran in the hall to protect the hard wood underneath. Why not? Antonio puffed out his decorated with metals chest when he took a deep breath. Honestly, she's more like a sister and I'm not attracted to her in the slightest. Her shoulders dropped with relief. She hadn't known she was so stiff. She lowered her head. So I shouldn't be jealous? His shoes came into her view and she glanced at him. Absolutely not. A second later, he lifted her chin and gazed into her eyes. Her eyelids fluttered closed and her lips puckered. Then his descended upon hers and she kissed him. With him, she had everything. The moment he ended the kiss, he wrapped his arms around her waist and held her close. I wish we could skip dinner and be alone. She hugged him and then straightened his tie. We promised your mother. Other than beefing up palace security, I'm happy to stay. With you. He nodded and walked with her through the palace. Though as more and more military people were stationed, she understood this was the guards' quarters. Antonio's hand laced with hers. General Babek, Your Highness. The general stopped mid-step and asked, How may I help you, sire? The guards were missing for a time, near my fiancé's door. Korba tried to get her to go with him. Babik's face went white. The captain of the guards will be placed under review. I will find out what happened. Good. Kristin tightened her hold on Antonio's arm, feeling a cold stare. She discreetly looked around, but it wasn't anyone near her. All the guards had their eyes respectfully averted. I'll report the moment I know something. I suggest you go to dinner, Your Highness. Your mother has cameras ready, Babik said. Antonio stood, poised for a fight if needed. I want men loyal to you to guard my family, including Kristin, Babik said. Absolutely. Kristin still felt someone watching her. Goosebumps grew on her arm as Babik said, We will find out who in the army cannot be trusted. Antonio closed the circle between the three of them. He tapped Babik on the arm. Good man. We know Korba is in the palace. I want him found. Babik's gaze softened as he looked at her for a moment. Did he resent that she, an American, would marry the prince? Korba's sister who works in the laundry might be the link. I will let you know. She swallowed. Babik, be careful. I feel like someone is watching me right now. Grande then nodded. Of course, my princess. Not yet. Kristin felt a coldness inch up her spine. Until the danger was over, she had no idea what to do. Settling insurance claims hadn't prepared her for this. Antonio led her out of the military barracks and back into the main palace. They walked down a hallway with gilded frames and she started to feel better. Surely nobody would be out to get her in front of a bunch of cameras. Warmth returned to her face. So, we're off to dinner. In a second. He stopped her. She felt the cold metallic phone in her hand and asked, though she knew the answer. What's this? It's not the ring I promised. I've not had time to go and get one. Understandable. She smiled at him. There was no need. In her room, she'd felt his body near hers, and her hands had grazed his suit. She had no memory of touching a phone. He'd been all muscles and soft wool. So where did you get this? He crossed his arms. I took this when you spoke to Babik, on our way out of the barracks. He took it back and then programmed the phone. I'll upgrade the phone tomorrow, but I'm the first number on speed dial. I'd have come to you faster if you called, but you were smart to email me. She took the phone back and held it to her chest. Sounds perfect. This was the first time in my life without a working number. Then she shook out her red dress and headed into the hallway. She offered her arm and asked, Dinner, let's. He took her arm. They walked together and saw the moonlight through the huge windows, and then they heard the chatter of people outside on a patio. Antonio brought her into a dining hall that could easily sit 50 people at the long table, though for this occasion it was 6 white and gold settings near the door with Queen Anna Camilla at the head. Marco and Renee sat on the left next to a beautiful blonde with her hair designed in an updo that would take hours. The blonde must be Sophia, who sat next to the queen. The other side was untouched and must be for her and Antonio. Antonio let her hand go and hugged his mother. Renee looked at her with concern. Marco insisted I stay here when I saw your message. He said that you were safe with Antonio. We're okay. Kristin used the top edge of the seat near her to hold on and stay steady. She wasn't sure why, but the room felt icy in here too. The queen then said, "You're courageous." She lifted her chin and stared right at her. "It must be one of the things my son finds attractive in you. You look good in red. It complements your pale skin." Kristin was probably overreacting. She glanced around the room, but saw no danger. The queen was polite and courteous. She bowed her head and let go of the chair. "Thanks. I went through a lot of the dresses you sent to find something I liked that still maintained a modest cut." The queen then shrugged and shook out the flawless green chiffon skirt of her gown. Once she was done, she said, "It's teasing the public, but we must announce your wedding to the cameras outside on the patio first. I've planned the ceremony for 3 days from now. Son, where is your grandmother's ring?" 3 days was fast. Antonio blushed and seemed taken aback. "I don't have it." "I have it, Your Highness," the other woman in the room said and took it off her finger. Kristin held her breath and stared at Sophia. She had blonde ringlets in her hair and cool blue eyes. The small woman must be a foot shorter than her, but she handed the ring to Antonio as he said, "Sophia?" Something inside Kristin gnawed at her. "Antonio," Sophia said, "I'm happy the computer led you to someone who has made you so happy." "Computer?" Kristin asked out loud. Sophia tried to give her the ring. The worldwide search for a bride he conducted. Kristin refused to take it, and Sophia placed the ring in Antonio's palm. "Through it? Your mother handed me the ring to try on months ago, and I forgot about it until tonight. I tried to see you earlier, Antonio, to give it back, but, well, we were taken hostage. I am thrilled for you." Antonio found her from her job application, not the equivalent of royalmatch.com. She tapped her fingers on her arm and demanded his gaze. "What worldwide search? Run by IT? Was it my application that brought you to Miami or something else?" Antonio's cheeks turned slightly red, and he looked down to avoid her gaze. The application was further screening. Her heart skipped a beat, but he looked at her with those flecks of green that made his brown eyes seem brilliant. "I had a month to find a bride, and it seemed the fastest way to shift through data." The hard facts made her accept that love, or the beginning seeds of love, had never truly existed. Hadn't he said so in the contract? She should have known better and protected her heart. She stepped back and shook her head. "I said I'd marry you because I felt something, not because..." Maybe she had said yes so fast because he was a prince. Either way, she thought he might grow to love her, but he hadn't told her everything. She lifted her chin. "Of all this, Antonio, you didn't tell me. I have less than 2 weeks until I must marry. What happened after we met has all been real." She slipped out of his hands and covered her lips. "Was it? How can it be when I was targeted by a computer program? I was a stupid fool to believe there might be more." She turned to leave. Antonio called out, "Kristin, wait." However, whatever else he said faded as the door closed behind her. She needed to get her head on straight, and she ran down the hall, alone. Romantic love wasn't real. She had always known that, so she shouldn't feel this bile grow inside her that made her bitter and sad. She should have been armed and protected herself from this sense of loss. Her mother had been right all along. Chapter 12. Kristin's entire body was stiff with hurt pride, and her muscles banded together. The contract should have been enough of a signal to keep her heart safe. She glanced around the hallway, unsure where she was, and her heartbeat grew faster and faster. This was the cost of taking a risk, allowing herself to believe in something more. She increased her speed despite the red satin heels, but she wasn't sure she was going in the right direction. The blue walls in the never-ending hallway, separated with oak doors that led to rooms she'd never been in, was making her dizzy. Her skin felt dewy again, her hairs raised as if someone was close. She called out, "Whoever is there, Go away." A shadow stepped forward from behind a corner of the upcoming hall. She caught her breath. "Princess." Ice raced through her veins. She recognized the 40-something-year-old man she had met earlier in the hall. "Korba, I'm not a princess." He inched closer to her. Her spine became like a steel rod as he said, "You're an American, and the last thing we need in this country are your people to come and take us over." Her heartbeat was so fast she feared a heart attack, but her years of self-defense classes reminded her to keep her knees apart and ready to kick. Her hands clenched into fists. "My people? I don't know the president. There will be no tanks coming in after me. I'm nobody. I want to go home." He turned as if to walk with her down the hall, without a care in the world. "Then, I will drive you to the airport." "You will?" Her voice was an octave higher. She coughed, but the adrenaline still pumped in her veins. "That's it? You're not going to threaten me?" He moved closer to her and invaded her space. "No. The prince must marry in 2 weeks. If you are gone, then we can proceed as planned and no one gets hurt." The hair on her body stuck straight up. She put her hand out to create boundaries. "Proceed as planned? Just leave me alone. I can find my own ride. Your country must have a car service." He grabbed her arm and tried to force her to go with him. "See, I can't do that. You have to disappear for 2 weeks, and that's exactly what we're going to do. You're hurting me." She squirmed her shoulder. He squeezed her arm tighter. "Then come quietly." "Not a chance." She stomped on his foot with her heel and then brought her leg up to knee him in his groin. The slit in her red dress allowed her easy movement. "Ouch!" He let her go and covered his manhood. "Ow!" She refused to wait and see if he was okay. She ran. Once she was in the hallway, she took off her pretty heels and continued to run faster. She heard no footsteps behind her. Picking the first door, she ducked inside, then quietly closed it. Once she locked herself in a small dark closet devoid of clothes or anything at all. She ensured there was no other entryway by hitting the back wall. Safe. She dug the phone out of her bra and listened to her heart go fast as she said to herself, "Now let me call Antonio." Someone banged on the door. Her hands shook. Antonio answered and she didn't wait for hello. "Korba is here. He tried to kidnap me." "Be right there." Antonio's words were like steel that helped brace her against fear from the ramming of the oak door outside. Then another man outside the door asked, "What's taking so long?" She didn't recognize the voice. Instead of ramming, there was a jiggle at the knob. A second later, the door of her closet opened, and it was a young brown-haired soldier standing with Korba. She dropped the phone in her bra and made her hands into fists. The soldier tried to get her, but she kicked his leg right at the kneecap. He shouted, "Ah, ah, ah." Korba shook his head and stood more in position to defend himself. "No one likes assault, princess." Korba commanded the soldier toward Kristin. "Get her." "Ah." Footsteps marched in the hall. The soldier grabbed her shoulders and held her captive. The door swung open, and this time Bobik and 2 of his men pointed guns at them. "I command you to stop, Henry." The strong boy holding her neck must be Henry. Antonio had sent a rescue. She stilled in that moment. Korba then said, "Not a chance, Bobik." She stilled in that moment. Korba then said, "Not a chance, Bobik." She reached up and got her hand underneath his and used that as momentum to swing out of his grip. Henry wasn't expecting her move. "What the?" Bobik grabbed her and pulled her behind him. "Princess, come where you're safe." More guards marched into the room and immediately controlled Henry and Korba, handcuffing both men, despite their vehement struggles. Bobik walked with her away from the scene, so she didn't see much else. As they went down another hallway, she couldn't stand the silence anymore. "They were trying to kidnap me and wanted Antonio to marry another." Bobik didn't blink. "Princess, it's best if I take you to your room. His Highness will meet you there, but on a personal note, I hope Prince Aussa marries you. You're fearless." That was adrenaline. She shook her head as her heart still beat wildly. The panic hadn't gone away. They neared her door and she massaged her forehead. "You can tell. This political situation wasn't good for anyone in Antonio's family." She'd talked to him about that, not his general. She nodded and opened her door. "Okay, thank you. I trust you." "Good." Bobik closed the door behind her. She walked into her room and stared at the dresses still on racks and sat on the chair she had her makeup done in an hour ago. Everything had changed. Antonio targeted her specifically and lied about it, which gnawed at her from the inside. Then he had a political mess where there was clearly a plot for a coup. She should go, pack her bag and get out of here. Her lips still tingled with his kiss, which shouldn't make a difference, but to her it did. If she went home, no one would make her feel like that again. But a kiss wasn't love. Her head began to ache though, at least her heart slowed to its normal pace. The door opened and she rose to her feet, expecting Antonio. Her eyes widened and she bowed her head and curtsied when she saw it was his mother. "Your Highness." Queen Anna Camilla stood in front of her. "I thought you were about to be my daughter-in-law. Why did you leave?" Kristin wasn't sure what to do. She glanced up and saw the queen was about to sit where Renee had her hair done with her. Kristin returned to her seat. "I thought you wanted Sophia to wed Antonio." The queen motioned for her to sit, and once she did, she turned her knees toward her. "I want my son to inherit the throne and help us squash this coup in our small kingdom." Foreign affairs weren't her cup of tea. She'd studied enough history to know monarchs tended to lose their heads against the will of the people. If that's what the people want, democracy isn't a bad way to go. It's not. The queen spoke with such assurance that Kristin accepted it as truth. "But you're under a bad impression at the moment. The citizens of Avzi love us." Kristin lowered her head and let the sense that Antonio was not going to die here wash over her. She could breathe easier as the queen said, "We are a constitutional monarchy, and we were brought back by the majority over a decade ago. There are splinter groups loyal to other nearby countries, but they are not the people. You have already been told our attackers were outsiders. Antonio said he'd lose his ability to see his family ever again if he doesn't marry in 2 weeks. Would you really banish your son?" "No." She sighed and leaned closer. "The laws are ancient and meant to preserve bloodlines that he didn't know about until it was almost too late. But..." Kristin pleated the red fabric in her fingers and tried to figure out how she felt. She chose her words carefully. "I don't know if he should marry me." The queen's chin lifted in a royal manner, but she reached out and patted Kristin's hand. "You make him happy. I see it on his face and you look happy next to him." She lowered her lashes. "I was, but he doesn't love me or believe in love. From what I understood, you don't believe in love yourself." The queen stood, straightened any non-existent wrinkles her ball gown might have, and then said, "Argue about semantics later. He gave you a contract outlining duties you would perform for a fee, correct? Right now we have the press here, and it's time we all do our duty." If she married him, then she needed to speak with him, alone, about his computer search. If people knew the Playboy Prince was actually looking for a wife, he would have been inundated, and he had no time to waste. Antonio was always so logical about everything. She swallowed her pride. "Where is Antonio?" The queen stopped at the door. Antonio and Babak had to speak, but, well, here he is. Kristin's gaze locked on his. A different sort of rush pulsed in her veins now. She couldn't look away as she asked, "Can you give us a minute?" The queen answered, "Of course." "Kristin, do not wash your knuckles or change out of that dress. I want the press to see that you can take care of yourself." Feisty American. Kristin tore her gaze off Antonio and stared at his mother. She truly was a master politician. "Yes, Your Majesty." The doors closed behind her and they were alone. She wanted to run into his arms, but she wasn't that weak. She hugged her waist to still her wayward thoughts. "Antonio." Hinjoon tamaliden dini naundor. He came closer and traced her face. His touch ignited her cells and made her ache to be with him. "Kristin, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, hold on." She tore herself away and marched toward her bag. She was about to do something possibly reckless, but she had to follow through. She took out the contract and dug for a pen. A moment later, she signed it. Then she handed the papers to Antonio, who asked, "What's this?" "The contract," she reminded him. She then straightened her dress and ignored the small tear near her knee. Her pulse raced as she said, "I'll still marry you." Oh, he reached out for her hand again, but she kept hers at her side. This was a no-love agreement. She stared down and asked, "So, you forgive me for leaving you at the table?" Oh, he narrowed his gaze and his brow furrowed. "I think I should be the one asking you. I should have told you about the computer program." It was not her style to let a computer give her an Excel sheet of names and numbers of the men she might marry. She'd skipped internet dating despite recommendations because she felt people lied in their profiles. But since she was part of his scheme, she wanted the numbers. How many people did it find for you? He crossed his arms. After going through billions, you were the final choice. The only name was hers. Whoever he hired was both her fairy godmother and the devil himself. But if she chose to stay, then in time she'd figure out a way to win his heart too. Love had to exist somehow. Right now, she was still too angry to think clearly, so she pushed the contract into his hand and hoped this ended the conversation. Well, here is the contract. We should be good, and I'll conduct myself properly from now on. He reached out for her, but she avoided his touch. Kristin, if he touched her, then she might let go of her anger, and that had kept her alive so far. She needed the protection of her shield, and he might take it away by being kind. Let's go tell the press. I'm thrilled to be your bride. Kristin, I'm sorry. Tears swelled in her eyes and she turned toward him. He pierced through her armor, and she felt the waterworks growing that would run her makeup. She sniffled to stop it. Don't. Let's just go. He came forward and brushed a wayward piece of hair out of her eyes. There was only you for me. I can't imagine marrying anyone else. She hugged him and sniffed against his shoulder. His mother had wanted her to be strong, but now she'd be a hot mess. Stop. I'll ruin my makeup and your mother wants me looking tough. He massaged her back, which helped calm her as he kissed her forehead. After, can we talk? Just you and me? Sure. What else could she say? She was tired. She knew he wasn't in love with her. She'd agreed to his terms of the contract. Now to navigate through her own heart to figure out how to live with this decision, because the truth was, she wanted him. She wanted to be here, and she wanted to be in his arms. And most of all, she wanted to believe that love was real. Chapter 13. Antonio felt ice still in his veins despite Kristin being saved from Corba's clutches. Bobek had told him that Henry and 4 other guards were in the communist bloc. One had joined earlier that day, when Antonio brought Kristin home because he was scared his country might join Slovenia or Italy, as they were nestled between the two countries. The fears were irrational and based on history where their kingdom didn't maintain self-control. Henry hadn't needed to threaten Kristin, and he empathized with the 18-year-old boy who just joined the guard to make money for his family and got misled by Corba. The courts would decide what was best for him, but he'd mention it in his written testimony. He had to reassure the people, but in front of the camera he couldn't say much. He'd always hated the camera, which was why he normally pasted a fake, somewhat arrogant smile on his face during interviews. He nodded. Kristin answered questions with a genuine smile. She wrapped her arm around his and said, "I'm delighted to marry Prince Antonio Aussa." One reporter asked her, "What brought the two of you together?" She nudged him. He met her gaze and then loosened his tight muscles in his shoulders as he tugged her closer for a side hug. Her mussed hair was falling out of her updo, and her red dress was torn at the knee. "She applied to be my secretary. I saw more in her, and it wasn't just her fighting skills." She laughed and beamed into the camera. "I don't remember boxing anyone during my job interview." She turned and stared at him again. "I was too busy gawking, unable to believe that I was in the room with you." He hugged her and wished the camera wasn't there. He'd kiss her and find a way to fix his mistake. "Her honesty and drive are part of why she is my perfect bride." He turned back to the reporter. This time he had a message and his shoulders tightened. "Now, I also hope anyone else who wishes for a coup pays attention. I will not allow one more person in this palace who threatens my family. The only way the Aussa reign will end is if in the election, the people choose a communist regime. Focus on winning the votes and leave my bride alone." Kristin blinked up at him. What vote? Goodness, things had been so rushed since they'd met that she didn't know, and of course this had to play out in front of the camera. He took a deep breath, showed his arrogant smirk and said, "I've not explained anything to my bride. I was too busy trying to get her to say yes." She laughed, so comfortable with the camera crew that they smiled back. "I'm not easy." He took both of her hands in his. "Right before our wedding, in 3 days, the nation decides if we are to return to the communist way that they lived under when my family was in exile, or if we continue forward with capitalistic leanings. and our family as a symbol for the people. It's his family that led us all to a place where we were blessed by the Holy Family." One reporter added, "Any true citizen of Afsi wants your family to remain in the palace, Your Highness." Antonio felt his cheeks heat, but he glanced at Kristin. "No matter what happens with the vote, Kristin needs to know I choose to marry her, and it's not because of ancient laws." The look of compassion in Kristin's eyes while she spoke to the reporter made him think she was the prettiest woman ever. Then she tilted her head and stared at the camera. "So either I stay here as a princess, or just become your wife where we don't have to rush into things. Either way, I win." Natural ability did not begin to describe her with their audience. He'd taken years of study and still his stomach felt like it was in knots. He tugged at her to go. She waved at the camera and the reporter she just spoke to waved back. Kristin's charm was intoxicating, and soon everyone would see how wonderful she was. He guided her away from the balcony, and he felt calmer having her to himself. On their way to her room, he placed his hand on her back. She turned toward him and stared at his profile. As they reached a window where the full moon shined on them, she reached out and asked, "I was happy Bobek saved me earlier, but I felt better the second you came to me. I was frantic that I didn't have your location." He decided to take her outside to the balcony. He opened the door so the cool, fresh air kept things between them easy and crossed his arms. "I called Bobek, but you never told me where in the castle you were. He found you first. My mother and I came here as soon as we knew where you were headed. She wanted a few minutes to talk to you, alone." Bobek and I discussed the guard's loyalty. She closed her eyes and nodded. Once she opened her eyes, he asked, "What I don't know is what she said to you. She said she loved you." Kristin went to the end of the balcony that overlooked the river and the forest beyond them. Everything sparkled from the moonlight and mist. He followed her and asked his next question, though he was mesmerized by how the moon caught gold in her brown hair. "What else did she talk to you about?" She turned toward him with both hands on the balcony rail. "She talked about duty. Now that sounds about right. What else?" If he understood why she became more distant emotionally, then he could fix it. She let go of the railing and stared at him. "She told me what I needed to hear so that I'd stay in Avats." He kept his voice low. "She even made the night air smell better, with a hint of floral." "What did you need to hear?" "I told you." She looked into his gaze. "It was about duty, and if I wanted to stay with you, then it was time to follow through with my part of the deal." The sense she didn't want to be kissed hit him. He kept his distance, but offered her his hand. "Kristin, I should have told you. Why did Sophia have that ring on her finger?" She interrupted his apology. Her palm brushed against his and then she tugged it away. "I would never presume to wear someone else's things." The truth was, he had no idea. He'd intended to buy Kristin a ring from him, but between hostage situations there'd been no time. His heartbeat raced. "I don't know." She covered her lips with her fingers as if she wanted to hide. He had no idea what to say, but then she lowered her hand, placed it at her side, which seemed unnaturally stiff, and said, "I'm not asking because I'm jealous. She knows your world. She wants to marry you. Why can't you marry her? Why did you resort to a computer search?" He leaned against the balcony rails. If he had met Kristin organically, he'd have chased after her immediately, wanting to know more. Right now, he felt the money he paid it was all worth it because she was here. He had to convey the truth. "I met Sophia when I was 13. She was introduced as a potential bride when we lived in England, and then she never left. I don't remember holidays without her presence. I understand that my mother wants to ensure I continue the bloodline, but I felt trapped." She took a deep breath and then mimicked his stance and leaned against the rails. "So you relied on computer technology and trusted that?" The wind gently pushed Kristin's hair in his direction. He moved so she had less of a breeze in her face. "The last woman I was remotely interested in never spoke to me after meeting Sophia. I had to do something, and she's always right behind me. I don't want to marry someone because all she sees is my title and a chance to be queen." She reached out and brushed her hand against his. "You hardly know me." Her touch was like an electric rod. He scooted closer. "I know enough. Kristin, I want things back to where we were before dinner." She came closer and leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere. But what's holding us back isn't the dinner or Sophia. What's wrong? Whatever it was, he'd fix it. Fast. Kristin was his. She swallowed as if nervous. It's the contract. We agree that love isn't a factor. I'm in danger of violating that clause. Love. The word clung in the air. His parents married for love, and he only put that in the contract in case he wanted a way out of marrying a stranger. Everything was different now, but he didn't know the right words. He reached out and brushed the hair that stayed near her eyes off her cheek. Kristin, tomorrow, after our day where you get fitted for a dress, did you become your mother with talk about clothes for appearance's sake? She shook her head. I've not thought about a wedding dress. He patted her arm. You need to, quickly. Tomorrow evening, can we spend the night together? I'll plan something special. She smiled at him, and it felt like he'd won a marathon, but the only crowd that cheered was the one he needed. You had me at tomorrow. I promise I'll make things better. Then she wrapped her arms around his waist and puckered her lips. He leaned forward and accepted her offering of peace. Her kiss righted everything in his world. Without another word, he led her off the balcony and toward her room. Once he opened the door for her, she reached into his suit jacket, massaged his back, and kissed his cheek. Stay with me. No one has to know. Bumhurndle the men's hardy wand in the palace. She kissed his cheek again. Does it matter? No ring. He kissed her and forgot about that for the moment. She tugged him toward her bed and he said, I have to leave early in the morning for the changing of the guard ceremony. I'm pinning a medal on Bobik and the young nurse who saved my father's life. That's tomorrow, and Bobik deserves a raise. She took off her earrings and placed them on the vanity below the long mirror. The racks of clothes were gone now, and he had a clear sight to her bed. His body grew hard, so he tugged his ear to avoid the change. Duty. You'll see my mother and pick out a dress. Mom. She removed her necklace as well, and then returned and kissed him, drawing his lip into her mouth. All this protesting. If you don't want to, oh, I want. He kissed the nape of her neck. Her skin was soft and tantalizing. She wiggled her backside and laughed. Then help me with my dress. He reached out and unzipped the tight red dress. The curve of her back was something he could stare at all day. Once the zipper went to the bottom, he traced her spine with his lips and kissed her neck again. Kristin, you are beautiful. She turned and let the gown hit the floor. She tugged at his suit jacket and he slipped it off, along with his shoes. She unbuttoned his shirt and gazed up at him. So, any hints on your plan tomorrow for a special evening? She reached the bottom button. I made you a promise I intend to keep, but that's tomorrow. No! She unbuckled his belt. I can be patient as long as you keep me busy. Without another word, he stripped off the rest of his clothes and let his manhood free. Like this? Now you're getting it. She scooted on the bed, inviting him to join her. He unclasped her bra, freeing her nipples. They were pert and ready for his kiss. How about this? He claimed her chest with his lips. She arched back for him. He let one full breast free and aimed for the other. What was that? She wrapped her legs around him, and he felt her panties as the barrier. No more talking, Your Highness. Mornmus, or are you ordering me around, Princess? He traced her body with his fingertips. Her skin was soft everywhere, and her curves just made him harder. He tugged off underwear so there was no more barrier. She giggled and reached for his shoulders to pull him up to her face. Is that a problem? He claimed her lips in a kiss as he pushed his way inside her. She sighed a sweet sound as he said, Not as long as I can do this. Oh, yes, she murmured as he set a rhythm for them. Then to tease her, he withdrew and kissed her neck. She placed her hands on his hips and gently guided him back inside her. More. Yes, he retook her body as his own. They were one, and she was the perfect mate for him, no matter how he had found her. Chapter 14. Kristin Wells sashayed in her blue jeans down the halls of the palace and really studied every corner. Impeccably well kept, the pristine powder blue walls with white trim looked spotless, and not a speck of dust was anywhere. Soon, this would be her home. Her body hummed for Antonio, though last night she'd hardly slept. He was amazing in everything he did, and his stiff upper lip wasn't stiff at all when he feasted on her. She giggled and continued down the hall. Antonio had drawn her directions this morning, and she held the paper in her hand to find the breakfast room, where she was supposed to meet Renee. She followed the map and stood in front of a large white door with gold trim. This reminded her of how she imagined Versailles in France, though she'd never been to compare. Perhaps he'd take her on a tour after they married. She sucked in her breath and opened the door. Everyone stood from their seats at a huge dining room that was clearly being used as a conference room. At least 10 men and women in suits stood next to Renee and the Queen, who was the only one seated. The Queen turned her head and said, "Kristin, glad you could join us. Come in." Her skin prickled like she was a young girl caught by the teacher for some mistake on a test and expected to be corrected. She lowered her head. "Am I late to a meeting?" "Mum, I let you sleep in as my son hadn't left your room until 3 hours ago." The Queen waved her forward to the seat next to hers. Once Kristin stood at her place at the table, everyone waited for her to sit. This was her life now. Kristin nodded, though her cheeks were hot, and sat. "Yes, thank you." The Queen then asked politely, "So you worked out the problem?" "There was a problem?" Renee asked, and her eyes grew wide like saucers. She hadn't been the best friend, Kristin noted, confiding everything about the contract. It seemed too personal to share, so being upset over it wasn't something she could tell Renee. Kristin tugged her ear. "It's fine now, Renee. Antonio and I made plans to see each other tonight." Queen Anna Camilla told the group. "He has already informed me that he will not be available for tonight's foreign affairs dinner." "Oh." Kristin turned toward everyone and asked the Queen, "Are these your foreign affairs guests?" "No." The Queen waved her hand. "These are designers and they wish to know your taste in clothes. Some have samples for you." Kristin stared at all of them. Designers? Seriously? The Queen thought about clothes all the time, but Kristin kept that to herself. "I thought we were here to discuss the wedding, the ceremony, expectations." Everyone else took their seats. Renee said, "Valentino's a top designer, next to me here, and a few other brands we both know." Queen Anna Camilla said they want you in press conferences and out in public wearing their line of clothes. You're to always look fabulous. Renee laughed. "But yes, the primary purpose today is to find out what kind of dress you want to get married in." Her jeans were Banana Republic, which she had stashed away the extra money to get on sale, so she had no idea about Valentino other than the designer was out of her price range. She blinked and then folded her hands together on the empty table. It seemed no one had touched the buffet behind her, though the smell of bacon lingered in the air. "The truth is, I never thought about getting married to have a dress picked out, so I'd like to try on a few different styles to really see which one I like." Renee laughed and sat further back in her chair. "This sounds awesome, and whatever you don't want, I'll happily take." The Queen nodded her regal head. "The next room is already set up for you to try things on. Right now, we'll just choose from different whites and basic body types." Renee smiled. "Try the mermaid on first, Kristin. You have the perfect figure for it." Kristin took a deep breath. At least Antonio had warned her about what was necessary for today. Also, Sophia wasn't here. Nothing could go wrong. She let out a soft sigh as she imagined her wedding. "Glad you're here, Renee." The group all stood once she did. She'd eat after she tried on a few dresses. Renee linked her arm with hers as they proceeded through the door to the next room. "Once the wedding is over, I'll go back to my normal life, but you'll start living in this world forever. I'm excited for you." Inside the room, she saw enough clothes to open her own shop, and these were just samples. Kristin passed a rack of Balenciaga designs and kept the question to herself on who they were. She walked straight for the wedding dresses and let Renee hand her one. She hugged it to her waist and blinked. "Renee, I'm happy." The main door of the room opened as light grew brighter between the racks. Kristin pressed her lips together and let the shiver of cold sharpen her spine. The Queen then said, "Sophia, we discussed that you would not come today." Kristin walked closer to the main room to see. Sophia lowered her head and spoke softly. "Your Highness, I came to apologize. My own wishes." She shook her head and stared directly at Kristin in the side door. "I shouldn't have put the ring on. I wanted..." This time she curled her fists and glanced at Kristin. "I hoped to be the one, but he chose you." Antonio said she scared off the last girl. Kristin stayed hyper-aware, but tried to be kind. Okay, don't worry about it, Sophia. Sophia took one step farther in the room. Before you start trying on dresses, can I talk to you? Kristin glanced at the queen. What should she do? Queen Anna Camilla liked Sophia, and Kristin needed to be the one she liked at the end of the day. She swallowed her fear. Of course, she handed the dress to Renee. Be right back. Sophia then motioned for the two of them to leave. Kristin followed her into the hall. Where do you want to talk? In here. Sophia opened the door across from them. I have a surprise for you. Every cell in her body told her to run, but she needed to get this conversation over with in order to have a strong marriage. She forced her sluggish feet to go inside, but once she did, she stopped. Her neighbor from home stared at her, his eyes big and a pale face beneath a mop of blonde hair. Greg, what are you doing here? He's come to save you from making a big mistake, Sophia said, not sounding meek or sorry anymore. Greg winced, as if this was the last place he wanted to be. He wore a wife-beater and cargo shorts that he normally wore when washing his car outside the apartment complex in the humid Miami heat. Kristin put her hand in her pocket and gripped her phone. She hoped she hit the power button, and Antonio. He'd programmed his name as number 1. She did it as quietly as she could, but Antonio had warned her to be on guard. She faced Sophia again. Excuse me? Sophia circled her like she was a lion and Kristin the prey. Greg here has already confessed to our local news that you love him and that you are using our prince for his fortune. That's insane. Kristin kept her head high, tracking Sophia. Kristin, just listen to her, please, Greg said on a sob. She has my mom. His mother? How would his mother fit into this plan of Sophia's? His face was sickly white beneath his Miami tan, so she believed him. Sophia crossed her arms. Your friend Renee is also about to find out that her parents are missing too, and she needs to hurry home. All these people were in danger now because of her. Kristin's blood froze. Why would you do that? Seems you don't have family I can use against you, but you are loyal to your friends. Sophia came closer and stared her in the eyes. I fully intend to be queen and help my people rebuild in a better sense than you ever could. Her people. She clearly already saw herself in the role. Kristin's palms broke into a sweat. What do you want? For you to leave quietly, Sophia said, without a word to Antonio. All her problems just burst forward as a movie that replayed in her mind, but this time it was Sophia. Kristin's fingers shook. Are you behind what happened here in the palace? The hostage situation? The disloyal guards? Sophia rolled her eyes. A smart woman would have left on the first plane out of here. I don't know why you stayed. Kristin needed to be in control and think on her feet. She turned to her neighbor. Greg, where is your mother? I don't know. He pointed to Sophia. She only let me talk to her on the phone and told me to get on the plane if I wanted my mother to live. Greg's fear was palatable. His body shook. He swallowed repeatedly. The tremble in her hand now moved to her entire arm, but she hid it behind her back. Why would you hurt innocent people, Sophia? Antonio's my property. No, he wasn't. He turned to a computer to find a new wife that might match rather than be with Sophia. The thought helped stabilize her hands, and she stopped shaking as Sophia continued. This entire kingdom will have its first queen without a king soon enough. I've been biding my time, and at the last second you showed up. I will not tolerate this interruption of my plan. Sophia intended to kill Antonio too? No. Her hands went into fists. She refused to let this woman hurt more people she loved. Suddenly, Antonio and a guard came out of the shadow of the other room. Bobik, we've heard enough. Arrest her. Kristin's heart leapt. Antonio? Bobik placed handcuffs on Sophia, none too gently. What about my mom? Greg asked. I need her back. She's in danger. Antonio wrapped his arm around her, but nodded at Greg. My brother Lucio is at FBI headquarters in Washington the 600th already. I thought he was looking for a wife, but he's been tracking Sophia's known associates for the past year. Let me call him. Thanks, Greg said. Babik and the guards took Sophia out of the room. And Renee's parents? Kristin asked as Antonio dialed a number on his phone. He spoke into the receiver, then raised his voice and said, "Lucio's on the phone. I'm putting him on speaker. Go ahead, Lucio." "Buongiorno. The FBI has confirmed Renee's parents are at home and currently serving the agents tea and donuts," Lucio said. "There are agents checking Greg's mother's house now, but no sign of her yet. They will report to me, so I'll know more shortly." He ended the call. Kristin closed her eyes and prayed everything was fine with Greg's mother. She had to be okay, for all their sakes. She finished her prayer and then asked, "So, how can we help Greg, Antonio?" "We'll tell you anything we discover." Antonio rocked on his heels, his hands behind his back. "Let's hope your mother is safe, but for right now, we can offer a room in the palace for as long as you'd like, and a flight home. Whatever you need. But I recommend waiting for my brother to call me back with news. He won't let you down." Greg said thank you in a shaky voice. He took a few steps, but his walk was unsteady. He stopped and coughed, then coughed again. Kristin went straight for the untouched buffet and grabbed a glass of water. She returned, handed Greg the glass, and then hugged Antonio. "Antonio, let's go tell everyone what happened while we wait for news about Greg's mom. It's really over now." He kissed her forehead, and they walked out of the room and across the hall. Beside Antonio, a rich and full life stood in front of her. But first, they needed to ensure no one else was hurt. Chapter 15. The moment Antonio entered the room, one of the designers moved the rack of wedding dress samples behind one of the other samples, so it wasn't obvious to see. She'd always heard it was bad luck to see the dress, so she'd not invite trouble, even if it was a silly superstition. Greg went and hugged Renee with his arms only, as if he didn't want to get too close. Renee's face was red, but she squeezed his neck. Kristin glanced at Queen Anna Camilla and a dozen designers in a row, like this was a fashion show. A moment later, Renee joined Antonio, who spoke to his mother. The queen looked shaken at the news, then said, "Sophia's from Neblo, a neighboring region that did not bring back their monarchy. It is possible that she has followers from there."
Shana was from in Hokan.
Antonio held Kristin close. Bobek opened the door, and her breath caught in her throat as the general, straight-backed, bowed his head. "Your Highness," and the queen motioned for him to speak. "Sofia Venko promised a quarter of our guard lands and money for their help in reclaiming her rightful throne." Antonio shook his head and continued to hold her with one arm around her waist. How many women had Sofia threatened throughout the years? She swallowed as Antonio asked, "How did such a thing happen right under our noses?" Bobek stood at attention, his expression grave. "She's been a guest here for so long, Majesty. Most assumed she'd one day be Antonio's bride. Now that he's marrying the lovely Princess Kristin, most are questioning what they have already done for Sofia." "I'm not a princess, Babak." The title felt wrong at the moment. Antonio answered without commenting on what she'd said. "The biggest question right now is what Sofia has done with Greg's mother." Greg glanced over at them, and the pain in his eyes was heart-wrenching. Babak never blinked. "I'm coordinating information with the FBI, but we have no record of a plane landing here from the United States." Good. If Greg's mother was safe at home, then Kristin could breathe again, and the ordeal would be over. Where would she be, if not in Avsa? Babak answered like a well-trained soldier. "The FBI believes she's somewhere in Florida, and they have a trace on Zika Horvath." "Zika?" The queen paled. "He worked for you, a member of the guard." "Yes." Babak's next words held a streak of cold. "If he returns, he'll face a court-martial." Greg piped in from behind them. "I just want my mom to be okay." "We will do everything we can," Kristin promised. The queen then motioned for both of them to follow her onto the patio. "Antonio, can I talk to you and Kristin for a minute?" "Yes, mother." Antonio offered Kristin his arm. They both followed the queen outside. "What's going on?" She crossed her arms and stared at both of them. "The people will need to see us united this evening. The wedding is in 2 days, and so is the vote. I'll need you ready, so it is imperative that Kristin try on dresses, so she's gowned as a royal." Kristin wasn't born into politics, but his mother worked endlessly. Would this be expected of her too? By signing the contract, she agreed to do whatever Antonio needed from his wife. "Mother," Antonio said, dropping his voice, "what if the people vote to end our constitutional monarchy? and return to the communist ways that were implemented. His mother quickly answered, "Don't be defeatist, Antonio. It's not going to happen." If they lost the vote, this might mean that Antonio was free to live his life with or without her. Kristin turned to him in concern. He wouldn't have to get married in 2 days, right? "Mother, be prepared." Queen Anna Camilla brushed her hand against her son's cheek, letting the other fall to the side. "That's what I'm telling you both." She turned toward Kristin and smiled. "Pick a dress. I'll handle everything else." "I will at once." What else could she say? Right now, she was picking the style. Then the rest of the design would follow. The queen hugged them, and they returned to the room with the group of designers and the racks of dresses. Kristin immediately walked over to the group and called for her friends. "Renee, Greg, I have to go change, but let me know if anything happens. Can I watch the fashion show then while we wait to hear?" Greg sounded like he hated every word he said. If she had loved ones, other than those here already, it would be hard to be anywhere else but with them too. "Sure." Renee offered a sympathetic pat on Greg's shoulder that he turned away from as she said, "Why don't you sit with the designers?" Antonio kissed her forehead, but then his phone rang. She saw it was his brother Lucio again. They spoke so fast that she had no idea what they discussed. As she walked toward the racks, Antonio grabbed her wrist to hold her. "Kristin, there must be news." Her heart sped up. "What?" He then leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Keep your phone on you at all times. I added a tracer, which was how I found you this morning." She sighed and hugged him. He truly knew how to protect everyone. "So you received my call." I was pressing buttons and hoping. Yes." He pushed her hair out of her face and nodded. He then kissed her cheek and kept his voice low so the group waiting for her couldn't hear them. "I heard every word. We'll need to stay sharp and on our toes." "Yes." Her heart beat for him and she wished she could wrap her arms around him, hold tight and kiss him. However, there were probably rules against public displays like that. She hugged him and then let go. He spoke in a more normal tone. "Tonight, after the announcement my mother needs us to make, I still want time alone with you. I planned something." She felt her cheeks warm as she nodded. "Then I'm all yours." "I like that. A lot." He walked to the door. Being Antonio's wife meant becoming a princess, so Kristin went toward her friends and asked, "Renee, the mermaid dress was the first style?" "Yes, I put them in order," her best friend said. Kristin saw Antonio leave, though he winked at her before closing the door. Once he was gone, she picked up the first dress and said, "Good, help me." She put it on and gasped for air as the zipper constricted her waist. Yes, it was shimmery white, satin and lace, but she couldn't breathe. "No thanks, but look at your figure," Renee said, turning Kristin toward the full-length mirror set up in the anteroom. "Absolutely not." Renee pulled her out to show everyone, and Kristin ignored the gasps of excitement from the designers. So what if she had the perfect hourglass figure? This dress style was a no. She'd never make it down the aisle. Suddenly, Antonio dashed into the room with his hand covering the phone speaker, gaining everyone's attention. "Greg, your mother boarded a flight to Vegas. FBI is intercepting now." Greg sat on one of the chairs near the long dining table, and Kristin saw the glimmer of a tear form in his eye. "Can I talk to her? It's my brother Lucio on the call," Antonio said, though it was clear he was uncomfortable with the man's tears. He hit the button for speaker. "Greg wants to talk to his mother." Lucio, who had a deep voice similar to Antonio's, spoke to someone he was near and then told them on the phone, "We are patching things together now, so you can talk to her directly." A few seconds later, an older woman said, "Greggy, are you okay?" Greg wiped tears from his eyes. "Mom?" His mother sounded all choked up too. "Greg, you're safe. I was so worried about you." "Me?" His voice cracked. "Mom, you were kidnapped," his mother moaned. "No, they told me you were going to have to sacrifice yourself to save me. I can't let you do that. You're my only son. Be safe and live." Greg cried, then tugged at the scooped neck of his white tank top. "I can't, Mom. There is a bomb strapped to my body that's set to explode. I'm sorry. I love you." "Wait, what?" Antonio ended the call with Lucio, stepped back and shoved her and his mother behind him. He looked over his shoulder and met his mother's gaze. "Go, get Babik. I have to get your father." The queen ran out of the room. "It's strapped to my chest," Greg said in tones full of misery. "Sophia and Victor Amadeus threatened to kill my mom. They had pictures of her tied up. Sophia said she was going to let herself get caught so Victor could win." "Victor? Marco's friend." Antonio gestured to those still in the room. "Kristin, Renee, everyone. Get out. Go to the front of the palace, outside." Kristin grabbed his arm, unwilling to leave him. "Do you have a bomb squad?" Antonio covered her hand with his. "Marco is the best trained person in the country. His mother must have told everyone on her way to the sick room because guards rushed to help get the guests out, and his brother Marco ran inside." "I'm here, Antonio." Kristin rubbed his tense arm muscle. "What can we do?" "Help my mom and my father, Kristin." Antonio stepped toward his brother and Greg. She held him firm to keep him one more second. "What about you?" Antonio kissed her fast and hard. "I'm staying to help my brother fix this, and then I'm going to find Victor Amadeus. This has to stop." "I love you. Come back to me," she said without a thought and hugged him. He massaged her back for a brief second. "Absolutely." Without another word, he let her go, and she ran after the other guests. Whatever happened, Antonio knew she loved him. Now she had to help get a sick king out of the palace before the bomb exploded. Antonio had to come back to her, safe and sound. Chapter 16. Antonio's forehead beaded with sweat as he watched Greg sit on the chair. The bombs were not visible beneath Greg's wife beater. Marco spoke with Greg while Antonio ensured the room was clear of people, then gave Marco the signal that everyone was gone. Now that it was just the three of them, Marco had to disarm the bomb. Kristin had whispered she loved him. "Stand up." Marco ripped Greg's tank top so he could see the bomb. Antonio's jaw clenched. The device was so thin that it hadn't been visible beneath the tight fabric. Greg stood still while Marco traced the belt with a small metal that looked like a pen. He stopped and pointed. "This is an IED, clearly made to let the world believe this was a suicide bomb." Marco then pointed to a plastic container. "This is the PEDN, but I need to find the trigger and stop it before it detonates." Greg's tears rolled down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted to wash my car. That's why I'm wearing these ugly clothes." Antonio tried to keep Greg calm while Marco worked overtime to find a way to ensure that bomb didn't go off. "We'll get you back there, Greg." Greg nodded and sniffed. "I don't want a life of excitement. I just want to go home and forget this ever happened." A loud bang echoed as the door opened with such force it hit the wall and was then followed with heavy footsteps. Now what? Antonio turned, expecting to see Babik, but Victor Amadeus walked into the room with a semi-automatic gun. Antonio flexed, eager to face the threat against his family and win. "Keep working, Marco. I'll handle this." Victor snorted with derision. "I'm sorry. I can't let you do that." Antonio straightened to meet the man who wanted to steal his throne, his legacy, from him. If he died tonight, then he died knowing Kristin and his parents were safe. He'd take Victor down with him. In that second, he understood Greg's tears, not for himself, but for a loved one. Antonio never blinked. He crossed his arms. "Victor, put the gun down." Victor came closer. "You walk around all proud of yourself because you were brought back to be a future king, when the truth is, you don't deserve any of this." Antonio inched closer. If he had a chance to rush him for the gun, then they all had hope. He kept his words steady and his forward movement unnoticed. "It's true. I don't deserve a crown. I never sought it out. It was offered to my father because of our family lineage. The people believe if we're here, then our kingdom is blessed from heaven above and that they will all prosper." Victor snarled and cocked the gun. "Your father bribed people to get back to Avsi." Antonio put his hands up but took another step forward. He was closer. Now, that's a stretch. His dad hadn't bribed anyone. "Either way, you've lost. Even if you manage to kill all of us, my brother Lucio is in the FBI. So someone in my family survives to take over the throne. One more step, and he could tackle him. You gain nothing from any of this." Victor pointed the gun at Antonio's face. "I get to watch you and your brother die, and know I finally stopped you." He had one chance. He lowered his head like he was scared and asked, "Stopped us? From what?" "From having what you don't deserve," Victor said. Antonio jumped forward and punched him square in the nose. Victor rocked backward, off balance. Antonio reached for the gun and struggled to get it out of Victor's hands, peeling back Victor's thumb to get the man to release his desperate grip. As Antonio threw the weapon on the floor, he hit Victor again. That's it. This is over. Not quite. Victor pulled out a small device that must trigger the bomb. "Don't!" Greg yelled, his tan face paling. Marco called out, "It's clear." Antonio's heart raced. Could he trust that Marco had really fixed it? He clawed at Victor's arm in an effort to get the trigger, and they both wrestled onto the ground. A shadow loomed behind them both, and then someone else punched Victor in the back of the head. He sprawled, unconscious. Greg kicked Victor for good measure and stood above him. "No one gets to hurt my mother." He assisted Antonio up. Antonio wiped his hands on his pants and then patted Greg on the shoulder. "Thanks." A second later, the ricochet of the bomb exploding knocked them all on their feet. Antonio flipped over on his stomach. Where was Marco? The debris cleared the room, and it seemed like all four walls still existed. Marco then called out from the patio, "Is everyone okay? What happened?" Antonio stood up again. This time he helped Greg. Victor was still out cold. Marco pointed to the balcony. "I threw it into the river, away from the village and the castle." Quick thinking. Hopefully Kristin, his mom, and everyone else was safe in one of the other towers. Antonio glanced around the room for something that might be used as rope to tie Victor, but then settled on his belt. He knelt next to Victor and looked up at his baby brother. "Want to call Babik?" Marco nodded and took out his phone. He spoke to the guards and then hung up. He knelt next to Antonio and adjusted the tightness of the leather around Victor's hands. I knew Victor was jealous, but I had no idea it went this deep. Neither had he. He thought Victor and Sophia were just hangers-on socialites who never went home. Until recently, Sophia had only ever tried to kiss him and scare off other women. He shook his head and thought of Kristin. He and Sophia cooked up this scheme. The vote and my wedding made them desperate, but I have no idea why Lucio suspected them for a year. "I'm glad you found Kristin," Marco said. "And Lucio suspects everyone and trusts no one." True. Kristin's smile made him ache to be with her. "I should go find Kristin now." The march of the guards echoed in the hall. Antonio stood and saw General Babik, who seriously needed a Medal of Honor. "Babik, arrest this man." He gestured at Victor. Babik answered, "Yes, sire." Marco spoke to Greg, who paled as Antonio approached. I get it. You didn't do it." Antonio understood Greg wasn't in league with Victor and Sophia, and he'd been used against his will. He nodded at him. "Let's go find the others. They must be terrified." Greg asked, "Is there a phone so I can talk to my mom again? She's probably sick, thinking I'd died already." "Sure." Antonio dialed Lucio while Marco walked beside them through the halls. Antonio quickly told Lucio to get Greg's mom back on the line. Once she was on the phone, he guided Greg into the library and handed him the phone. "Talk as long as you want. We'll come back here and meet you." "I owe you an apology, Antonio," Marco told him once they closed the library door and walked outside to meet their parents. "Yeah?" Antonio's eyebrows arched as the doors opened for the two of them, and cheers echoed from the villagers who gathered at the gate. The jubilant cries were better than New Year's celebrations. Antonio searched the clustered group for Kristin and found her in a white wedding gown that had his pulse hammering, her curves, her long curls tumbling over her shoulder, her skin as delicate and pale as the satin. She stood next to his fierce mother and frail father, who dozed in a wheelchair with a blanket over his lap, but at least he was alive. Marco slapped his shoulder and said, "Perhaps your computer search wasn't all wrong." Antonio broke the spell of Kristin for 1 second and saw his brother stare at her friend. "You and Renee are cozy." Marco's throat turned red. "She's sweet and determined to head home. I'm going to try and see her after your wedding." Antonio wrapped his arms around Kristin and the rest of the world stopped mattering. He kissed her forehead and let her rose smell wash through him. "Kristin," she hugged him tight. "Thank God." She unwrapped one arm and placed her hand on his face as if she checked for bruises. I was so worried. We're safe. He met his mother's insistent gaze. He followed her look and tapped Kristin's shoulder. She turned around and her mouth opened. Marco and Renee were locked in an embrace. She said, "They're kissing. Who cares?" He fixed her hair out of her eyes. Then he leaned forward and claimed exactly what he wanted. Kristin's kiss was worth everything. His entire body grew hard, though they were outside, and a crowd cheered. He ended the kiss, but kept her tucked under his shoulder. His father's raspy voice was solemn, and everyone went quiet as he spoke, now awake and alert. "Son, what happened?" Marco disarmed the bomb strapped to an innocent man's chest. Victor was in league with Sophia. They are both in custody. "How are you, father?" He knew the cameras watching were on his father and mother, so he took his place as the dutiful son beside them. His mother announced, "King Leopoldo will make a full recovery." "That's good to hear," Marco added from behind him. His father held his head high and stared at Kristin. "I will be standing at your wedding, son." His mother spoke to the reporters like the pro she was. "And be there for when the votes are tallied." "The cheering crowd empowering you to get better, father?" Antonio asked, pressing his hands on both arms of the wheelchair. Kristin stayed next to him. His father then told him and reporters, "Your mother is a good woman. She's the best reason to keep on living." A loud sigh erupted from the onlookers. Antonio took Kristin's hand and led her to stand in front. "Father, I'd like for you to formally meet Kristin Wells." "This is my bride." His mother then came beside Kristin and tugged on the wedding dress she still wore from the interrupted fitting and said with a smirk on her face, "As I told you, son, Americans under or overdress for everything. I hope your Kristin is ready for my help." Oh no. The last thing he needed was for Kristin to feel insulted. "Mother, I'm joking." Queen Anna Camilla smiled and stroked Kristin's arm. Kristin took the queen's hand in hers. "I hope you aren't. I need all the help I can get." Finally, he could breathe. His family was safe. Kristin was not in any danger, and they had a genuine chance to be happy. But first he needed to speak to her, just the two of them. His heart beat as he remembered her words of love. He prayed those weren't an in-the-moment declaration, and that she truly meant what she said. If she did, he'd have everything in the world, and he could accept being a future king with Kristin at his side. Chapter 17. Kristin woke up in a pink nightgown that went to her ankles. She turned and pressed against the warmth of Antonio's back. Covered in a cotton t-shirt, she kept her eyes closed, listening to the birds chirping outside. Last night, she'd intended to stay awake and wait for him. She blinked and realized her plan went wrong as it was morning. She rolled away from him and stretched. His hand went around her waist and he squeezed her for a hug. "Kristin?" He kissed her cheek. Somehow she'd hit the lottery when Antonio found her. She shouldn't have been angry at how. She sighed and said, "Sorry, I fell asleep last night. I know you wanted to talk. After all the excitement, I must have been beat. But it feels good waking up in your arms." "I agree." He sat up, not noticing the gorgeous day or the green forest in the distance. He kept his gaze on her as he said, "And it's okay. Let's eat breakfast together." Tomorrow was their wedding, the reception, the vote tally, and it all changed her life. There was so much to do. "I'll have to eat fast. Your mother has a packed schedule for me, including picking a dress style." They both climbed out of the bed as she said, "One of the designers will then whip up something in a factory and have it here by midnight. I'm fascinated to see how that works. But first, the bathroom and a toothbrush." Once finished, she walked out and saw the small breakfast table on her balcony now had eggs, toast, coffee, and her favorite prince sitting there drinking a cup. When she approached, he kissed her forehead and then took his turn in the bathroom. The normalcy between them was sweet. She wasn't worried about anything. She sat down and poured herself coffee. A few minutes later, Antonio came out in his green t-shirt and blue boxer briefs, clearly not caring if anyone saw him. He sat down and picked up his coffee. She nodded. "This is good." He finished his cup and then rose to his feet. She put her cup down when he stood in front of her. Her pulse beat a little faster and he knelt down. Her skin jolted. This seemed like a proposal, but she'd already said yes. She trembled and he reached for her hand. "Tomorrow is our wedding. I went out and bought this for you." Her breath caught in her throat, and she saw the specks of green again in his gaze. He pulled out a jewelry box, and her heart stirred. Was this his surprise from last night? She opened the square black box, and a huge smile grew on her face at the twinkling jewel inside. "It's a ring! I promised." He gave her that look, slightly arrogant, sexy as hell, that made every woman in the world swoon. He took the box back, then removed the ring from the black velvet. The classic gold band and solitaire diamond shone brightly in the morning sun. Kristin reached out and gripped his shoulder. "You didn't have to." He scooted closer and hugged her. Then he let her go and stared into her eyes again while kneeling. "After what happened with Sophia, I really did. Why was he still on his knees? She already had the ring." She swallowed, unsure of what was happening now. She leaned forward and asked, "What are you doing?" He folded both of her hands in his, the ring between them, and pressed his forehead to hers. "In the heat of the moment, you told me you loved me." "Yes?" The patter in her heart grew, and her breaths were shorter. She hadn't even thought about that moment. She had blurted out her feelings and then ran for her life. He caressed the back of her hand. His gaze made her forget where she was, because all she could see was him as he said, "I wanted that to be true, and not just because we could die. I love you, Antonio." She brushed his scruffy jaw, and it scratched against her palm. He nodded. "Good, because I love you. I didn't expect to ever fall in love, and I put in the contract that nonsense because I hadn't met you. I do love you. Can I have the ring now?" She held up her hand. With a wink, he slipped it on her finger, but then he took her hand in his again. "Yes, but there is one more thing." "What?" All she wanted was a kiss, but she was willing to listen. He released her and reached under the food tray for an envelope that he slipped next to her. "I ripped up the old contract, but I will need you to sign a new one protecting my parents' crown. But you have my heart, and that means love." "Fair enough." She marched inside her huge room, ignoring the sparkle of the crystal chandelier and how it illuminated the room with morning light. She marched to the desk, found a pen, and walked back toward the patio. Antonio had stood up to watch her. She returned, took the paper and scanned it as she said, "I never had an issue with the prenup at the end. It was quite generous." She picked up her pen. Antonio reached for her hand with his mouth open. "Wait, you don't have to sign right now, but I do." She shook off his grip. She signed the papers, stuffed it back in the envelope, and handed it to him. "Why now? You should have read it. Taken it to a lawyer," Antonio protested. She narrowed her gaze and stared deep into his eyes. "Was there something in there different than before, other than what you took out?" "I increased the money for you, if something happens." He swallowed. To make him happy, she took the paper out again and read it. It looked the same to her, except he'd stricken anything about love from the contract. She flipped the page and saw the money he'd mentioned. Very generous. Years of reading books helped her read fast. She looked at him when she finished and asked, "Anything else?" No. She stuffed it back in the envelope and handed it to him. Everything was good. He took it from her and finally closed his mouth. "More important, I trust you. Tomorrow is the wedding, and I should head out. I'm going to be late for my dress fitting." "You are?" He traced her curves with his fingers. She puckered her lips and closed her eyes as she said, "Absolutely. I want you. But if I'm late, your mother will kill me. I've realized Queen Anna Camilla is big on clothes. It's her thing." "Yes, my mother always cares about looking good. My future wife." His lips descended upon hers, and he kissed her hard. The shadow of a beard pressed against her soft skin, tickled her, and made her aware of him. Her hands tugged on his shirt. She had to have him. She had to touch the hard muscles that were hidden underneath the clothes. She pushed the shirt up, over his shoulders. The ripple of his chest muscles was beautiful. She kissed his pecs while he stripped himself of his pants. A raw hunger for him overtook her senses when she glanced down and saw his huge virility. His large hand traced her body and lifted the nightgown she wore. She shimmied her underwear off so they both stood, naked and needy. She licked her lips and reached out to touch his length, but he stopped her. "I want to taste you. Last one of goal." His fingers found her entrance and played slowly while his mouth continued to feast on her breast. Heat grew for him, everywhere, and she was more than ready. She needed him. Instead, he kissed her again, this time on the lips, as his fingers teased what was to come. Between kisses, she said, "Please?" That sexy smirk she'd always liked about his photos showed up, the dimple deep. He whispered, "Tell me that you're mine and you want me inside you. I'm yours." She felt the heat in her face grow. She never talked about sex to anyone, ever. It was something that had made her uncomfortable, but Antonio's kiss and the gleam in his eyes made her want to please him. She opened her mouth and said, "Please put your cock inside me." He laughed huskily, triumphantly, and the sound made her heart beat faster. A moment later, he entered her nether lips and it felt like he could reach her womb itself. Somehow her body stretched to accommodate all of him. He kissed her again and teased her nipples, this time with him fully inside her. Something within her snapped and she lost the ability to think. She moaned, but it was like she wasn't inside her body. She was in heaven itself. A wave of pleasure overtook her. She needed him, now and forever. Chapter 18. Everything looked amazing. Kristin stood on her balcony and peeked around the corner of the tower, still in her nightgown. Her hair and makeup made her look like someone she had never been before, and the people of Avs wanted to see her. She wished her mother was here to see her now. Perhaps she'd tell her that true love might not have happened for her parents, but that love was real. Kristin believed in it now that she'd met Antonio. Horses' hooves clapped in the distance. From what Renee told her, there was a horse-drawn carriage at the gate, just for her. Renee came out onto the balcony, with her makeup now done, and said, "Come inside. You'll see everything soon. You're the star." I can't believe all of this is happening. Kristin let her best friend take her hand and lead her inside. Valentino designers waited for her to ensure she was perfect in the dress. Before they stepped back in the room, Kristin stopped and listened to her heartbeat, faster and faster. Today was her big day. She hugged her waist, closed her eyes, and let the moment sink in. Tonight she'd be a princess, even if the vote took it from her. Her life had changed, and she'd be married to a man she never could have imagined on her own. Renee then said, "I can. You deserve it. I don't feel like any of this is real." Kristin confided and turned toward her friend. Renee was her only link to her old life. Not that she had much of one. "This feels like I'm living someone else's life right now." Renee led her toward the food tray that was outside and poured them both a glass of water. She handed her a cup. "I've never seen you this happy." Antonio was why she'd stayed. Last night in his arms, she felt whole in a way she never had before. With him, she had no doubt that she was where she was supposed to be. "He's amazing." Renee laughed. "Amazing is your word for when you're very, very happy." She finished her water and put the glass down. "So yes, you deserve to get a happily ever after." Kristin sipped more slowly. She needed to take everything in. Then she felt her hand tremble with the glass in her hand. "Will you come and visit me? You're the closest thing I have to a sister, Renee." Renee took the shaking water glass before Kristin dropped it. "Are you joking? My students will never believe I spent the summer here and participated in your wedding. I don't think video evidence will get more than a 'That's cool, Miss Brown' response. So yes, I'll visit whenever I can." The blare of music from the street echoed around them. Her face heated. "Do the trumpets mean I'm late?" Renee opened the balcony door. "Let's get you into your Cinderella dress and get going. Antonio's waiting for you." Her thoughts returned to Antonio. His dark hair, brown eyes with those flecks of green made her ache for his strong arms to hold her again. Before they walked inside, she said, "He's handsome. How are things with Marco?" Renee's face drained of color, but then she held up her head. "He's fun, but I'm leaving in the morning when you go on your honeymoon." Kristin's shoulders slumped. "I was hoping he would sweep you off your feet and you'd be my real sister. Now that sounds like a fairy tale." Renee led her to the designers. It's time to be the bride. The word bride rang in her ears. She never thought she'd be one, and never imagined anyone in the world might care who she married. Once she walked outside, she'd be streamed live for the world to see. Renee went to designers who helped her put on her maid of honor pink dress. Kristin couldn't watch as designers added layers of white around her, but she peeked at her friend who looked sweet in that pink Valentino dress. Then the doors to her bedroom opened, and Queen Anna Camilla swooped in. Kristin's stomach twisted as she thought she was late. "Your Highness, they are tying me into this thing as fast as they can. You are to call me Anna." The Queen's gold and blue ball gown screamed that she was the most important person in the realm. Kristin sucked in her bottom lip and shook her head. "That will take a while. You're a queen." Anna circled her, her arms crossed as she checked out the bridal gown. She nodded at the end and met Kristin's stare. "And my son is waiting to marry you, which means soon you'll be my daughter. I hope I do you justice today." Kristin lowered her lashes. The designer stepped away so nothing was between them now. Anna came closer, brushed her shoulders, and fixed the heirloom necklace that Kristin wore as something borrowed. "You already do, but you'll have to forgive me when tomorrow I start the 'When will you make me a grandmother' campaign." For the second time, Anna made her laugh. She wanted to go forward with her, but she stayed still as the designer adjusted the back of her dress. Kristin ignored the designer for that moment and tilted her head. "Let me marry Antonio first. Is she ready?" Queen Anna Camilla stated in a way that a few hundred years ago, if someone answered no, they'd probably lose their heads. The designer backed away and bowed. "Yes, Your Highness." The Queen then looped her arm with hers and walked her to the door. Renee followed behind them holding the flowers while the Queen told Kristin, "Proceed down the grand staircase alone. Don't trip. Hold your dress as you go down. Every 10 steps there is a level step that's elongated. Stop and wave, and if you see a camera, smile brightly. Once you make it down, walk into the carriage. Then as the horses bring you forward, wave at the crowds on both sides of you. Don't favor one side." Half the directions became jumbled in her head. Walk, stop, and wave were all she processed. Kristin felt more adrenaline rushing through her, but she tried to hold still. "What if I mess up?" "So what if you do?" Queen Anna let her arm go at the top of the stairs and stepped back. "As long as you get to the church and say 'I do' to my son." Kristin hugged her. Antonio's mother must be where he got his personality from, because underneath all the pomp, she was caring and devoted. She let her go and asked, "Where will you be?" "In the black limo in front. You're going to be great." Queen Anna then turned toward her friend. "Renee, you'll come with me as Kristin does her thing." Renee nodded and then handed Kristin a small bouquet of roses that were designed for her walk down the stairs. Kristin remembered the drill. At the church, she'd get her bridal bouquet. She accepted the flowers and Renee told her, "Think about Antonio and how you are about to be his. Meditate on his face. You'll be awesome." "Thank you." Kristin looked at the huge flight of stairs she was to walk down. She admitted quietly, "This part is slightly terrifying. Antonio is at the end. Don't lose faith." Renee backed away. "Got it," Kristin told her, but then the trumpets blared. Someone outside said, "Presenting Kristin Wells, soon to be the crown princess of Avs. May God grant her a long life, and with Our Lady's divine help, may the family continue to bless all of us." Kristin almost tripped on the first step. No one saw, but she left the shadow and made it to the light. On the first level, she stopped and waved. An image of Antonio's smile played in her mind, and she thought about last night and the night before that. Once she made it through this, she'd be in his arms again. She proceeded down the next flight and smiled again with a wave. Despite the bright lights, she made her way down the steps and into the carriage. With every step, she went one more inch toward believing love existed. Chapter 19. Antonio carried his tuxedo jacket into the groom's quarters of the church and draped it over a chair. His fiancée was soon to be his wife, who was about to be a princess. It would take a while to make it through the throng of people who wanted to see her. He heard laughter in the next room and knocked on the door. He hugged his brother, who'd arrived late last night. "Lucio, good to have both of my brothers here." Lucio patted Marco on the back and said, "Marco said the woman you found online was worthy." Lucio had no idea. To him, Kristin was the best thing that he'd ever found, and he'd not lose her, not now. "Worthy? Lucio, she's the best wife I could have possibly found." Lucio wrung his hands together and paled. "I have 9 months left. If my method fails, I may ask for your backup." With the internet, everyone's secrets and who they truly are were there to be data mined. He hadn't believed his computer technicians during that initial proposal meeting 60 days ago himself, but he'd been desperate. Now he wanted to sponsor everyone to use the technology to find their match. It had worked for him. He kept his words short, though. Tomorrow, if we're still princes, set up a meeting with IT. Answer every question, both of you. Lucio shook his head, as if not ready to hear it. Let's get through this day and get you married. He then poured everyone glasses of water, as the champagne was for the rest of the day, after the wedding. As he handed Antonio a glass, Lucio said, "Mother likes her, from what I understand. That has to make things easier." Oh. Antonio hadn't considered his mother's possible disapproval. He stared into the dark eyes of his brother and said, "Strange thing to say, Lucio. Did mother not approve of one of your dates?" That was a long time ago, as a teenager. Lucio drank his water, trumpets blared, and Marco gulped his glass, stood and announced, "Mother and father are here." Antonio and Lucio followed Marco's lead and put their glasses down. A moment later, their parents entered the church. His father leaned on his mother for support now that they were inside, because the march-in must have drained him. Antonio saw how much his father had improved and prayed for continued good health. He opened the door wider for his parents to join him in the private room. The moment they walked inside, his mother placed her hand on his cheek and did the same to his brothers. "My handsome sons." She then focused on him again, and music played in the church, as if on cue. "Antonio, let's go take your place." Antonio stayed still for a moment and then asked, "Mother, what happens if we lost the vote and people want us to leave?" She shrugged. "Then we leave for England and you're free to live a life with your Kristin. But I wouldn't hold any hope for that. This has been our home since your father's ancestors left Rome and founded this church and our kingdom. We never belonged in that English estate. We belong here, and we were granted this from land as our destiny. There were miracles. Yes, when Mary made it snow here, we know the story." History was an easy subject to fall back on, as Antonio thought that perhaps their mother was right. Maybe the intrigue was all because of jealous peers, and now the people of their kingdom could be heard. She nudged his shoulder. "Go." Antonio nodded and crooked his elbow. "We're going." It was time to ensure everyone was in place by the altar. "Walk with me, father." "Lucio, get mother." Lucio held out his arm for their mother, who asked, "Lucio, before we go, why did you suspect Sophia?" Antonio stopped and listened. "In England?" Lucio spoke coolly. "She helped you end things with Sabrina." Their mother's face went white. "She wasn't right for you, son." Lucio met Antonio's curious gaze, then looked away. "Mother, let's not get into this. You never saw Sophia for who she truly was. I did." Now was not the time for Antonio to ask more. Antonio and his father waited at the door for their cue. "Father, when did you know that mother would be the right one to marry?" "After working with her for 24 hours. His father's laugh made him look 20 years younger. "No one had ever dared speak to me like she had, and everything she said about me was right. I knew I needed her honest and lovely face in my life, more than I needed water or food." Right. In his gut, Antonio had known Kristin was the one for him as soon as she'd kept her cool after dropping her purse. The wedding planner, Maria, held up her hand. 10 seconds. Antonio quickly said, "If Kristin and I are as happy as you both are, then I'm truly blessed. Good luck, son." The music started. They marched down the aisle as monarch and future monarch. Cameras were on them both the entire time, and Antonio held his breath and tried to smile for the camera as best he could. His father sat with his mother in the front pew. Then Marco walked Renee, demure and pretty in soft pink, down the aisle to the dais. Finally, Kristin, dressed all in white, appeared like an angel in the distance. His skin grew goosebumps and his heart raced. Her dark hair piled on top of her hair, a curl looping over her shoulder, her essence radiant. She walked herself down the aisle and held his eyes the entire way, confident. Once she joined him, he brushed his hand against hers. "You take my breath away, Kristin." "I made it to you," she smiled, her breaths short as if she'd run a marathon. The priest performed the ceremony, and Antonio couldn't keep his eyes off Kristin. She truly was the one. He felt a tear form in his eye, but he wiped that away. The priest then said, "If anyone has any just cause why these two should not be wed, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." Silence clung to the room. The priest then said another prayer, and Kristin whispered, "I was afraid someone was going to speak. I'd not let them." He brushed his hand against hers. If she wasn't holding those flowers, he'd have held her hand. She whispered, "Now that I believe." The priest looked at Antonio like he was an errant schoolboy. "Repeat after me. I, His Royal Highness, Prince Antonio Cosimo Francesco Gastone Giuliano Piero Lorenzo Aussa, of the House of Lukshava, take you, Kristin Wells, for my lawful wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, until death do us part." Kristin whispered, "That's quite a long list of names." Antonio broke tradition and took her hands in his though she held that huge bouquet still. "I, His Royal Highness, Prince Antonio Cosimo Francesco Gastone Giuliano Piero Lorenzo Aussa, of the House of Lukshava, take you, Kristin Wells, for my lawful wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, until death do us part." Kristin's pure joy was all he ever wanted to see. The priest then turned to Kristin and said, "Now, Miss Wells, please repeat after me. I, Kristin Wells, take you, His Royal Highness, Prince Antonio Cosimo Francesco Gastone Giuliano Piero Lorenzo Aussa, of the House of Lukshava, for my lawful husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, until death do us part." Kristin's hands shook, and she listened to every word the priest said, then repeated, "I, Kristin Wells, take you, His Royal Highness, Prince Antonio Cosimo." She looked like she was about to cry as she tried to say all his names, but he mouthed to her when she faltered. "Francesco Gastone Giuliano Piero Lorenzo Aussa, of the House of Lukshava, for my lawful husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, until death do us part." She took a deep breath the moment she finished, and her hands stopped shaking. He whispered, "Good job." "I was terrified," she whispered back as the priest said another prayer. He winked at her. "Did I mention we have to name our son Cosimo Francesco?" She glanced at the priest again, but whispered, "We'll discuss that later." He kept his hands to his side, though it was so hard. Finally, the priest made it to the end. "By the power given to me by the law of the canal in Avsi, I declare you husband and wife." Everyone in the church clapped. The priest then said, "You may kiss the bride." She handed her flowers to Renee, and then he wrapped his arms around her tight and kissed her. An eruption of cheers exploded behind them. Antonio ended the fast kiss, but kept his arms around her while the priest said, "I present to you the newly wedded couple, Prince and Princess Antonio Cosimo Francesco Gastone Giuliano Piero Lorenzo Aussa, of the House of Lukshava."
She shook her head a little. "I hope I don't have to memorize that in the next hour."
He kissed her cheek and chuckled. "Kristin, in your interview you mentioned being a fast learner. I'm sure you can."
She smiled at him, and he felt like a conquering knight who'd finally come home. Kristin was his home and all he needed.
Chapter 20. The vote is in. Marco joined Antonio and Lucio on the makeshift dais in the large ballroom, while their mother and father spoke to Kristin across the room. Marco took the microphone and announced, 99% of the country wants us to stay." The ballroom full of people cheered. Antonio tapped his glass with Lucio, who said, "Mother was right again." Antonio stared across the room. Kristin lifted her glass in celebration. Tonight, Kristin was his, and tomorrow they would take a much-needed honeymoon/vacation. Warmth filled him. He told his brother, "Kristin and I will enjoy being spectators at your wedding soon, Lucio." Lucio lowered his voice. "I met with your IT department. That's quite a long list of things they want to know." Good. If Antonio could find the one he wanted, then anything was possible. They're thorough. Lucio looked like he might be sick. "I'll do my duty for my family, always." Antonio smiled as Kristin waved at him. He patted his brother on the back. "Great, now it's time to dance with my wife. She's waiting for me." "Have fun," Lucio said, but Antonio could tell that his brother felt about to be put in front of the firing squad. Lucio's story was for tomorrow. Right now, Antonio tugged Kristin into his arms and kissed her. He had everything. Thank you for reading. I hope you enjoyed Antonio and Kristin as much as I did. The next book, the Princes of Avsi novel, you'll get way more into what happened with Kristin's best friend Renee and Antonio's brother Marco. Order Forbidden Prince now. About the author. USA Today best-selling author. Victoria Pinder grew up in Irish Catholic Boston, then moved to Miami. Eventually, found that writing is her passion. She always wrote stories to entertain herself. Her parents are practical-minded people demanding a job, but when she sat down to see what she enjoyed doing, writing became obvious. Visit my website and download a free novel www.victoriapinder.com, Victoria at victoriapinder.com.